point, got to get it. Can't really, deal with the idea of next week at 3-4 with the next game at Arrowhead. Because 3-5 at basically approaching the halfway mark is going to seem like it's over for a lot of people, even though it won't be, because after the Cowboys and the Chiefs, remember, they've got 3 out of the next 4 at home, and the game that isn't at home is in Madrid. So keep that in mind. Yes, the opponents, Seattle, Detroit, and then Denver on Thanksgiving weekend are all very good opponents, it would appear right now. But, man, Sunday just seems like got to get this one somehow. Washington's still favored. They are just a 1.5-point favorite in this game. That they opened as a 2.5-point favorite down to 1.5 right now. I don't know. Is anybody else feeling this about Sunday? Maybe it's the fact that it's not a 1 o'clock game. Maybe it's, the highlighted spot at 4:25 in Dallas. The Cowboys, I said this before the Carolina game, that the Cowboys, if they got that game and Washington got their game on Monday night, it would really feel big. So there is that's missing from it. Both teams coming into the game off of losses and very disappointing losses. The Cowboys losing to Carolina on the road, and Washington, as we know, blowing the game on Monday night. I mean, they didn't blow it. They deserved to lose. The entirety of the game, they deserved to lose that game, as, by the way, Dallas did. It's also a very intriguing matchup in that the Cowboys are legit on offense, and it looks like CeeDee Lamb might get back. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing with the way they've been going. What if Pickens doesn't get any targets in the first half after being the most targeted guy? And by the way, really emerging for Dallas here over the last couple of weeks, I think it's fair to say, if you didn't think so before, George Pickens is making it pretty clear that he always was a number 1 receiver talent, but now he really looks like a number 1 receiver. Dude's got 32 catches and a bunch in the last few games with CeeDee Lamb out. He's got 6 touchdowns, in 6 games. He has been at times uncoverable. Look up, Pickens, in his separation. I know he's a good contested catch guy, but God, there was a lot of catches on Sunday against Carolina where he was just running free. Targeted 11 times in 2 of the last 3 games. We'll see what happens if CeeDee Lamb's back in the lineup. But is anybody else feeling this? I'm feeling like this is... I've always wanted Washington and Dallas to be legit good at the same time. That's not what's happening Sunday, okay? Dallas is still not they are far from a solid, entrenched playoff contending team. And I think most people still view Washington, even at 3-3, as a playoff type of team. The Cowboys, though, are so good offensively. They're exciting offensively. There's a little bit of Cincinnati from last year in the Cowboys this year, meaning that, Dak's having a Joe Burrow 2024 kind of a year with, Pickens and now CeeDee Lamb, just like he had Chase and Higgins, and they just can't stop anybody. Actually, to be honest with you, I think the Cowboys defense is actually worse than the Cincinnati defense was a year ago, because Dallas doesn't have a Trey Hendrickson to at least give you a shot occasionally. The Cowboys really stink on defense. Really, really bad. Like, they are going into this game, and it's kind of the way I felt about the Chicago game. Kind of felt like the only way you lose this game is if you turn the ball over a couple of times, or the defense doesn't play, a better game than they've played, recently, like against Atlanta. And both of those things happened. Cowboys probably are thinking they're going to put up 40 on Washington's defense, and Washington's probably thinking they're going to put up 40 against Dallas's defense. It may be one of those games where they could legitimately make Tress Way inactive. And the Cowboys could do the same thing. And if you're faced with fourth downs, go for them. Go for anything 4th and 6 or less, 4th and 5 or less. Looking forward to this game. There's just something about still, and I know that this is biased because we are a fan of this team. There's still something that when you say Washington versus Dallas, 4:25 on a Sunday in mid-October, and it just still feels like it should be something important. I don't know. If you want to weigh in, you can go ahead and call 301-230-0980. If you're feeling it about Sunday and this being the first legit Washington-Dallas game in a while. Let me just say that in this decade, you can go, if you want to the games in 2021 or 2022 late in the season, but not really. The Cowboys game here in 2021, when they played, in early December, I think it was, and Washington was decent, and it was right before all the COVID absences hit for them. We rip Ron Rivera, and by the way, justifiably so. I'm not going to defend Ron Rivera's tenure here. I'm not going to defend certainly his terrible job done as a general manager. I also, do acknowledge, and I think it's fair to acknowledge, he came into a situation that was not winnable. An organization that was in complete chaos, even more so than it typically was, came in, during the COVID year, which put them behind the 8 ball. And then he got cancer, on top of that. But he had to be the front guy for an organization that was spinning out of control, and it had been spinning out of control for years and years, but not like it started to spin out of control in 2020. The loss of the name, everything that, encompassed that. And then, of course, one Beth Wilkinson investigation after another, one congressional inquiry and hearing after another. But what I was going to get to was in 2020, they won the division at 7-9. 2021, when they won 4 games in a row to get to 6-6, they were actually playing pretty good football, if you recall. They beat Tampa and Brady at home. They beat Seattle and Russell Wilson on a Monday night. They beat the Raiders on the road. They were playing decent football, and that's the game that I would point to and say that's the last Skins-Cowboys game that actually had any level of juice. Here it is. I've got it right here. December 12th, Dallas came in 8-4. Washington was 6-6. All right, December 12th, 8-4, 6-6. Washington very much in that moment in the playoff mix. Very much were, especially with a 4-game win streak. Now, we knew they were limited offensively. No offense to the Taylor mob. We knew they were a little bit limited, but they were running the football with Antonio Gibson. Remember the game he had against Tampa during that stretch? And they were playing pretty good defense. And that game was it got close at the end when the guy that now has the podcast that's doing well with Taylor Lewan, the guy that played linebacker
Will
for us.
Compton.
Will Compton.
Yes.
No, I'm thinking of Cole Holcomb. I'm thinking of Cole Holcomb. Cole Holcomb was the guy that had the interception in that game. Will Compton was not on that team, I don't think. I don't think Will Compton played for the Rivera teams, right?
No, he was not on the Rivera teams. He was bouncing around the Raiders.
By the way, I like him.
Titans. He's
great.
Like
him.
He's hilarious. Will kills me. He works for the same company or worked for Barstool for a while. They have a Will Compton memorial stall in their bathroom, which I thought was really funny. So yeah, they've got like his jerseys and all that, but now he's on ESPN and it's very weird seeing him every morning. He's bald now too because of the Michigan-Nebraska rivalry since Michigan beat them this year.
Why? What? Explain. It was a head. Give me more details.
It was just a head
why
shaving.
He lost a bet.
Yeah. Taylor Lewan went to Michigan. Will went to Nebraska. Okay. So it was just a friendly rivalry. Whoever loses shaves their head. Will lost, shaves his head. Looked very weird bald. It was off-putting.
Yeah. So what I was gonna say, and it's gonna sound, I can already see and feel the venom spilling out of some of you. Please don't go down this path of telling us that Ron Rivera did, even a halfway decent job. I'm not saying that. And he had no shot, and I'm defending him from that standpoint. But the point is, in 2020, they went to the playoffs. Yes, as a 7-9 division winner, but they got hot late and they went to the playoffs. In 2021, they were 6-6 and very much in the playoff picture, playing meaningful games in December, including that game against the Cowboys, which was the last one. And then remember, it all fell apart because of COVID. They started losing players. They had to play that Tuesday night game in Philadelphia. Who was the quarterback there? I'm going to look that up. That was another quarterback that I can't pull it. I gotta look this one up. Garrett Gilbert. Garrett Gilbert had to play quarterback that night because everybody had COVID. And then remember the Deron Payne, John Allen dust up on the sideline when they got hammered by the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. Season was over at that point. But 2021, before the COVID losses, they were in the playoff hunt, playing meaningful games in December. 2022, of course, they were playing meaningful games. At one point, they were like the 6th seed, in December. They had that Sunday nighter. The game got flexed to Sunday night against the Giants. And that was a massive game, as was that game against Cleveland to stay alive when Ron Rivera didn't know that his team could be eliminated. So they played, all the way till January 1st, meaningful games in 2022. And then 2023 came, and we understand how that one went. Anyway, I got to that because I was thinking about the meaningful games between Dallas and Washington, and there really haven't been any since 2021. That 2021 game was really the last game that meant anything, because in 2022, they played Dallas in that final game of the year. Remember, was the Sam Howell game, when a lot of people, including some of you who are listening, were convinced that they had found the next Joe Theismann to be our quarterback for the next decade. Dallas had they had something to play for, but it wasn't that big of a game. And earlier, they had played Dallas much earlier in the year. It's really been few and far between. My God. I mean, you really have to go back to, 2018 a little bit with Alex Smith before he got hurt. You got to go back to 2016. The biggest Washington-Dallas game played in the last decade was Thanksgiving Day 2016. No other game that they've played in the last decade. Okay, 2012 is beyond a decade now. The season finale with RG3. The 2016 Thanksgiving Day game between 6-3-1 Washington and 9-1 Dallas was the most aggregate combined wins between the two teams in a matchup. You had to go back to the 90s to find another one.
First off, happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah. It was not a happy Thanksgiving, but it was one hell of a football game. That 2016 team just did not have a defense at all. 2015 didn't either, but that was a shootout between Prescott, who was a rookie, and Cousins. Cousins threw for 460 or something like that, and Prescott threw for, a bunch, and it was a hell of a football game. I'm not suggesting that Sunday's game is that. Although, there is the possibility that the Christmas Day game this year could be a meaningful game. We'll see. The NFC East is bunched up. It's tight. It is, right now a division in which nobody wants to step up and take it. And I bet you there will be discussion going into that game, depending on what Philadelphia does at 1 o'clock against the Vikings. They're on the road in Minnesota. If Philadelphia were to lose that game, I think you'd hear a lot of discussion about the winner of Sunday's game becoming sort of a favorite to win the NFC East. It's early, long way to go after it. And the Cowboys would just be 3-3-1. And Washington would be just 4-3. But it may be the way things shake out. Looking forward to Sunday. I'm glad Quinn recognizes a lot of the stuff that the older heads care about. And I like that about him. He is, he's a sponge on all that stuff. He knows NFL. He knows the history. And let's face it, going to Salisbury and, in the late 80s, whatever year he graduated from Salisbury. I mean, he knew Washington Dallas was a big deal. Yeah, a lot of big division games coming up, but this is going to be a big one on Sunday. All right, I got a couple things to get to when we come back on the show today. Denton coming up in about 20 minutes. We'll do a college football look back. James Franklin getting canned after their loss over the weekend. We'll look ahead to some of the big games this weekend. Charch is on the show, and you'll hear a portion of the Steve Suter film breakdown from my podcast yesterday. He is so good at this, guys. He knows ball, and he doesn't look at anything. He doesn't look at PFF. He doesn't look at any of the other things. He's got his own way of doing it, and you're going to hear him give out the top 3 and the bottom 3 grades for the offense and defense from Monday night's game. And I thought he had a very interesting take on a specific offensive lineman. You'll hear that next hour. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app. Denton's coming up with some college football talk, but I wanted to read a couple of emails here. This actually was a DM from my guy Chris. He writes, "I think I've emailed this to you before via your website form, but regarding the long field goal attempts, he's referring to McPherson for Cincinnati attempted a 67-yarder at halftime just before the end of the first half against Green Bay at Lambeau on Sunday. He did that first thing where Matt LaFleur called a timeout right before the snap, and he actually went ahead and kicked it anyway, and he made it. It hit the crossbar and went over, but it didn't count. The next one was just barely short and I think wide, so he didn't kick what would have been the record-setting field goal. 66, Justin Tucker is still the record. Anyway, Chris writes, specifically that 67-yarder that hit the crossbar and went through but didn't count. Do the rules prohibit the defense from having someone try to block the kick just before it reaches the crossbar? That's a really good question. You know, a lot of times, and actually Green Bay had a returner back there. If you had the guy that has the 44-inch vertical and you got a guy that can go up and knock it away, is it legal? Apparently, it is not legal, Chris. I looked it up. Goaltending, if you will, by a defensive player, this is in the rule book, leaping up to deflect a kick as it passes above the crossbar of a goalpost, the referee may award 3 points for a palpably unfair act. A palpably unfair act can be anything that goes against the spirit of the rule book or the integrity of the game. Actually, in reading it that way, it sounds like it's not necessarily a rule, but this is how it would be legislated using the palpably unfair act in the rule book. So there you go. Can't do that. You got to let that kick complete its journey. The 67-yarder, I think everybody knows that the ball is juiced this year, for the lack of a better description. They used to get these balls, an hour or 2 hours before the game to work them, the kicking ball. Actually, I don't think everybody knows this. The ball used for kickoffs, field goals, and PATs is not the same ball that's used in the game by offenses, centers, quarterbacks, etc. It's a different ball. They have a different kicking ball. And the ability now to have received these footballs, I think 2 months ago, and they've worked them in, they've massaged them, and they're broken in. That is right now, everybody in the league says the reason the balls are traveling much further than ever before on field goal attempts, and why I think Vic Fangio said, the Eagles defensive coordinator said recently, we're going to see a 70-yarder. Yeah, we saw one in preseason. We saw Cam Little of Jacksonville kick a 70-yard field goal in Jacksonville outdoors against Pittsburgh in the preseason. That is the longest converted field goal in NFL history in the preseason or the regular season. Brandon Aubrey actually has a 66-yarder in the preseason, but the longest field goal, the record, is still Justin Tucker, September 26th, 2021, in Detroit at Ford Field, 66 yards to beat the Lions at the gun, 19-17. There have been multiple 65-yarders now, including Chase McLaughlin's kick this year against Philadelphia at the end of the half. He kicked a 65-yarder at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. Brandon Aubrey last year kicked a 65-yarder. Brandon Aubrey's also kicked a 64-yarder. But the 67-yarder by McPherson, the Bengals kicker, would have been the NFL record. And in terms of attempts, we've not seen a ridiculous attempt other than the 67-yarder. That was the longest attempt of the season. But we did see last year Brandon Aubrey attempt in a regular season game a 70-yarder in Carolina. In terms of recent attempts, the longest was last year, Brandon Aubrey, a 70-yarder in Carolina. I think the 70-yarder, we used to think, well, it can only kind of come in Denver, or certainly not outdoors anywhere. But I think we're going to get a 70-yarder almost from anywhere at this point. The longest attempted field goal, if you're wondering, in NFL history, because I did get this from, where is it? Yeah. Oh, yeah, this from Izzy. Izzy wrote me, Kevin, I know you love to talk about long field goals. Did you see the Bengals kicker make the 67-yarder, but LaFleur called the timeout? Yes, Izzy, I did. And I do like to talk about long field goals. I don't know why I'm fascinated with the attempts, but the longest field goal attempt ever in an NFL game is 76 yards. Sebastian Janikowski back in 2008 was the longest attempt that he missed it. Mark Mosley, that Mark Mosley, MVP 1982, number 3, Mark Mosley, champion Mark Mosley, has the second longest field goal attempt in NFL history of 74 yards against the Giants back in 1979. Mosley also attempted a 70-yarder, but I'm going to tell you something about both of his attempts. He attempted both kicks with the fair catch free kick rule. We've talked about this before, but you're allowed, if you call a fair catch on a punt, you are allowed, if you want to put your field goal team out there and the defense can't rush the kick. They have to just be flat-footed, and you get a free kick, free snap, free kick, no rush. Most people have no idea about that rule. I know I've talked about it before, but it's a rule where you'll see occasionally at the end of the half or at the end of the game, if you're not going to take a free kick with lots of time left on the clock, because if you miss it, then the team's going to take over at that spot, right? So it's got to be the last play of the half or the last play of the game to do it. Although, hell, in this day and age with the leg and the ball, maybe we will see more of these fair catch free kicks. Again, if you're not following, if you call a fair catch on a punt, there is a rule that allows you, if you'd like, to attempt a field goal as a free kick field goal, meaning no rush, no defense, no special teams rush allowed. They snap the ball, the guy puts it down, and you kick it with no rush, no urgency. And that's happened several times in NFL history where those kicks have been tried. A few have been made over the years. Mosley tried a 74-yarder on that fair catch free kick and also tried a 70-yarder to win the game, by the way. This was back in 1979 against the Houston Oilers. Earl Campbell and the Houston Oilers. Season opener, 1979. They were down by 2, 29-27. Houston punted the Houston Oilers. Fair catch, and they sent Mosley out there to try a free kick 70-yarder to win the game, and he didn't make it. I don't remember how it traveled, if it was way short or if it was just, if it was wide right or wide left. I think it was short and off, and Houston won the game. Anyway, I think we just solved some problems there. We figured out that you can't jump up at the crossbar and block a kick. Which, by the way, would have been something now that these long field goal attempts are being attempted more often. You'd think about if you could do it, but you can't do it. And then for those of you that didn't know about the fair catch free kick rule, now you do. Joe's on hold. He wanted to weigh in on Sunday's game if it feels big in the Cowboys-Redskins rivalry or just, overall in the NFC East. Go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, what's going on?
What's up, Joe? So,
it is big for not just the NFC East, like for the standings, like you said. I mean, Philly could, as we talked about, they've struggled, even though they're 4-2. They could lose Sunday in Minnesota, and that game against Washington, Dallas could mean who's going to be on top of the NFC East. But not just
Dallas would not be on top of the NFC East if they won and Philly lost. Washington would be tied for first. Yeah.
but also it's also big for an NFC win for Washington because right now they're 1-3 against NFC opponents.
That's right.
But my question to you, Kevin, is that come December, when there's meaningful football for most of the NFC, because the NFC is stacked right now in the standings.
Yeah.
Is it possible that 10-7 wins the division for the NFCs because Washington has a tough schedule? You serve the schedule.
Oh, definitely. I talked about this last week. I said this could be a year based on, the first 4 or 5, 6 games now, where the NFC East winner is the 4 seed in the NFC playoffs. That could easily be the case. And by the way, 10-7, 10-7. Right now, I would say 10-7 wins the NFC East.
But Kevin, the other question is, Phil, like I said, Philly's struggling a bit. We don't know their identity yet. If Dallas say goes on a run and wins the division, or Washington wins the division, you got 2 great offenses. Could it be one and done for them in the playoffs if their defense stinks as bad as they are right now? That's the thing about the NFC.
Well,
we don't know. I understand. The Giants. I'm not counting. The Giants. I'm not sure about right now, and I'm not saying anything. But the Giants could play spoilers against Dallas and Washington.
Sure, they
in the
could.
coming weeks for meaningful football too. So
look, for our team, Joe, and I got to go. For our team, I just want them to get there because we got a cheat code when we get there. We saw it last year. So let's just, it's one week at a time, Mr. Cliche. But if they get there, we got a cheat code at quarterback. And so if we get there at 9-8, 10-7, whatever, and we're in it, even if it's the 4 seed and you're playing, the 5 seed in the first round at home, but you're likely not to play another home game, to get to the Super Bowl. I would not bet against us, not after last January. All right, let's do some college football with Denton when we come back.
Pick up your book bags. Grab your notebooks. It's time to go on campus with Denton.
Hey, give me my theme music.
All right, Denton is with us, as he is every Thursday, to look back at the last weekend of college football games and look ahead. But real quickly, and Denton understands this, that I have this fascination with weird things in the NFL, like long field goal attempts and the fair catch free kick rule. My guy Dan texted me and said, "You explained it for the most part, but you missed the point that it is from the spot of the fair catch." Very good point, Dan. I didn't explain it well. You fair catch it, and it's from that spot. You're not snapping it back 7 yards from there. You basically go out there with the holder and the kicker, and he kicks it with nobody else on the field. That's the free kick. By the way, the last one in the NFL was Cameron Dicker. Last year, late December, it was at the end of the first half. It was a fair catch and a 15-yard penalty for fair catch interference. So they walked off the 15 and they put him out there for a 57-yarder, and he made it. So I'm pretty sure we probably talked about it when it happened. All right, Denton is with us. Denton, of course, is the host of the Commanders pre- and post-game shows on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. He will be in, I don't know, does it 1 o'clock? Does it start 1 o'clock Sunday?
We're 2 o'clock, I think, 2 o'clock.
Okay, 2 o'clock, and then he'll be on afterwards. He's also the host of College Football Overtime on Sirius XM. You can follow Denton at The Denton Day. So we talked about Franklin, after the Oregon loss, and then certainly after the UCLA loss. But did you get surprised that they actually pulled the trigger for $50 million in a buyout?
Yeah, I was surprised at the timing of it. I knew he was going to be done after this year. He pretty much sealed the deal when you lose to UCLA. You just can't do that, especially after you had lost to Oregon. You knew what was at stake, and your team wasn't ready to go. And then you admitted as much. And then when you did the second week in a row where he said, "I admit as much that my team wasn't ready," and lose to Northwestern. I mean, like I said, it was already sealed. It was just a matter of when the firing was going to take place. I did not think that it was going to be as quickly as it was. I thought they'd give him to the end of the year because I think they would have saved a little bit of money in doing so. But you knew that this was it for him. He did a great job taking that program to national relevance after a very, very dark time, but he was never going to be a guy that got them to the next level of winning a championship.
So who does Penn State hire?
They're going to look into Kurt Cignetti. He's going to tell him no because he's crazy enough to believe that he can be what Bobby Bowden was to Florida State at Indiana, and I kind of think he might be right. So he's not going to take it. Matt Rule feels like he will go wherever someone offers him money. So he feels like the best option. I mean, they're going to make crazy calls. They're going to call Saban. They're going to call Urban Meyer, and they should. But it's Matt Rule feels like the best option. If not him, then you're looking at like maybe a Matt Campbell. I mean, I don't know how exciting that is, Matt Campbell in 2025.
Matt Campbell's a very good coach.
He is, but he's not going to excite the fan base the way that I think.
Yeah, they need a good coach, though.
Right.
Like Matt Rule, to me, is James. He's better than James Franklin, but the same issues that Penn State fans had with Franklin, they'll have with Matt Rule at times. Matt Rule gets a little confused in games when you watch some of his teams.
And I don't know how much would you want a guy, because I think Matt Rule's a really good coach, but he's only been at one place more than 3 years, and that was Temple. Like he was at Baylor for 3 years.
He's a Penn State alum, though.
He is a Penn State alum.
Yeah,
but Nebraska for 3 years. I don't know, that kind of bothers me at least a little bit. I feel like if another job opens up, I don't know how much he's going to hold on to the alum thing if someone's going to offer him more money. He's a capitalist. He wants his money. I can't blame him for that. It's a money-driven profession.
So I was thinking about something. LSU has been unimpressive getting to 5-1. You'd agree with that, right?
Yeah, their offense is less.
Their offense is really a problem. Garrett Nussmeier, maybe it's his health. Maybe he's not 100%. Whatever it is, they don't have the same. You pointed out they don't have the same wide receiver talent that they've had. I actually like them on Saturday at Vandy, but that's another story. If their season were to go completely sideways, lose to Vandy, lose to A&M, lose to Bama, is he out at LSU?
That's a great question. I don't think so. I
don't?
think they would give him another year because I think their problem would be how many other potentially available coaches do you think would leave their current spot for LSU? I think a lot of people would be interested, but how many guys that are better than Brian Kelly, not named Kurt Signetti, would take that job? Because firing a coach is one thing, but you have to have somebody ready to go. That's why Penn State, I think, fired Franklin when they did, because they wanted to let everybody know, hey, we're open for business. Even though you didn't need to fire him, you could just use agents and boosters and what have you.
Yeah, of course.
But I don't know. I think they would keep him for at least another year just to see, and then if year 4 doesn't go well, then I think you get rid of him.
Yeah, look, here's a question for you. Let's just say Billy Napier gets fired. Let's just say that Brian Kelly does get fired. Mm-hmm. LSU, Penn State, Florida. Rank them in terms of the best available jobs.
Well, LSU is one by a pretty definitive margin. Because they have shown over the course of the years.
I don't think everybody would answer it that way. I think some people would say Penn State's one, but I'm with you. LSU's a better job.
Yeah, I think some people would say Penn State is one, but I would heavily push back on that. They had one iconic coach for a really, really long time, and then they had a lot of teams would like James Franklin. A lot of teams right now in the Power 4 would really benefit from having James Franklin, including a team that one of us on the stream really, really enjoys, right? Like they'd hire him today if that was a real possibility and the money was correct. I don't know that Penn State is like this amazing, super, like awesome job. I don't. It's a great job, but LSU is an amazing.
Well, they have plenty of money.
Job. They do have plenty of money.
Important. And the passion. Penn State is a special, cultish in many ways,
right?
Kind of a situation. Right. I just think LSU in the SEC.
Penn State's a top 7 job to me, Kevin. LSU's a top 3 job. So I think that's a difference. Then Florida is like a top 20 job. Yeah, there's so
put it higher than that.
There's so much going on though in terms of the boosters. Like that's why Napier hasn't worked. There's been so much behind the scenes that is.
I actually think he's not a terrible coach.
I like Billy Napier. I don't know what has gone wrong there because I've asked around. I haven't really gotten an answer as to what exactly is causing all of the issues. I just get the same thing over and over, which is stuff behind the scenes. But there's something going on there. There's like a clash of power behind the scenes at Florida. But Napier's a good coach.
All right. How shocked were you that Indiana went into Outson and just laid one on Oregon?
That was huge.
6-0.
That was huge. And it was not so much that they won, Kevin. It was the way that they won.
Yeah.
Like if it ended up just being a shootout between the quarterbacks, that one kind of makes sense. Mendoza's a really good quarterback. He's going to go in the NFL draft round number 1. Dante Moore has been a really good quarterback this year. So had it been kind of similar to what we saw with Georgia and Tennessee earlier this year, where it's just blow for blow and Indiana happens to get the ball last and they win, that would be, hey, that happens. But the way that the defensive front took advantage of Oregon's offensive line, that is traditionally one of the best offensive line groups in college football, was stunning to me. And that kind of is why, one, I argued for them immediately, like, hey, that's a top 3 team in the NFL. But I said something on Saturday that got me a little bit of flack from Ohio State fans. But the Buckeyes, I think, are feeling pretty good that they don't have to play them in the regular season. I would still like Ohio State if those two teams matched up, but this is a different Indiana team. It's a complete Indiana team. There's not really one spot where you can look at and say this is a definitive weakness. So I think that's what I learned the most from them over the course of the weekend. So shocked that they were able to do what they did to Oregon's offensive line.
I think that, in thinking about Ohio State and Indiana, and let's just say they're the 2 best teams in the Big Ten since Indiana went to Oregon and won.
Yeah.
All right. Indiana's got the much better quarterback. They just do. Mendoza's legit. And by the way, he's NFL legit at 6'5" or whatever he is. And they've got a back, by the way, former Terp, Roman Hemby, who is explosive. And their receiver, number 13, is legit.
Yes.
Ohio State's great on defense, but I don't think they're that explosive on offense, not like Indiana.
No, I think they do have the potential to be, though. Like, if Sane can just be a little bit better, because that wide receiver duo with Jeremiah Smith and Tate, that's probably the best duo. But you're right. There's a big difference in discrepancy in the quarterbacks because Mendoza makes Sunday throws. And right now, Julian Sayin makes a solid Saturday throws. And that's a pretty definitive difference when you watch them. Watching those two side by side, you're really blown away by Mendoza. And then you look at the Ohio State guy and say, he's fine. He's better than some of the guys that we watch on Saturdays, that's for sure. But he's not Mendoza.
So let's go to, this week. I guess you could identify Ole Miss at Georgia as the game of the week, number 4 against number 9 or whatever their rankings are. Last week, Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss almost pulled off an all-time, loss. I mean, they were down in this game to Washington State, who, by the way, is a bad football team. What were they, 34-point favorites, something like that? Ole Miss was.
Massive.
And they hung on for dear life and won 24-21. And I'm like, God, man, this guy Kiffin, he schemes it up with the best of them. He's a quarterback guy. I'm not a fan, by the way, of Chambliss, as he's just not a thrower. He's a creator. He's an athlete. He can run, all that stuff. But I don't think, it's far different with him than Jackson Dart last year. I'm leading to this. I don't think they're that good.
I don't either, which is I did not think I would have that, because when they beat LSU, I had been a big fan of Chambliss, and I thought he played well against LSU. But with a bye week going into that matchup against Washington State, I mean, you could argue look ahead, but I just was stunned by how flat they were on offense. And I did not anticipate in the third quarter of that game, Kevin, sending text messages to people at Washington State, seeing to potentially line up an interview if they did the unthinkable and beat Ole Miss. But that's what I was doing on Saturday afternoon. Now, thankfully, for Ole Miss's sake, they came back and won. And now that game against Georgia has a whole lot of intrigue. I don't know if it would be as intriguing had Ole Miss had lost last week, but I just think they were flat. And I hope they can look better this weekend against Georgia. Old Lane Kiffin feels like he's back a little bit. I don't know if you saw, he called Kirby Smart fat in a press conference this week. So like old Lane Kiffin is back, but this is not nearly as good of a team as I thought they were 2 weeks ago. But I can say the same thing about Georgia. I'm not a huge believer in Gunnar Stockton. He hasn't shown me anything to make me think he's a great quarterback.
Well, that was last week. That was, to me, the biggest ripoff and the most painful loss, because I was on Auburn.
I was too.
And that was just a horrendous call at the end of the half. That was so obviously a touchdown. The ball broke the plane. How did they get that wrong?
And it took 30 minutes.
It was ridiculous. The last 2 minutes of Georgia Auburn on Saturday night took 40 minutes in real time.
It's just
to play.
Unbelievable. And Auburn, to, I guess, their discredit, they completely blew up on themselves after that. Like, they just did not know how to handle that. But the officiating at the end of that was abysmal. And then even in the second half, there were bad calls that I was like, how are we really calling this in a game of this kind of magnitude? I didn't think the SEC officials were great last weekend in that one.
No. And I'm kind of with you on Georgia, but I think we're going to see two teams that, it's interesting because in the SEC right now, I mean, I guess you could point to Bama, and because I'm not a big A&M believer either, but LSU doesn't look great. Ole Miss nearly lost to Washington State. Georgia should have lost to Auburn. They were completely outplayed for the first 30 minutes. Should have been down 17-0 at halftime. Bama's got a loss, and by the way, that was a good football game. By the way, the first game of the day last week, Alabama-Missouri, was a good football game. Who's the national championship, participant in the final two out of the SEC this year?
So I would, sitting here now, I would still lean Alabama, but they played some really close games the past couple of weeks. And if you look at their schedule, they got Tennessee this weekend. They're actually big favorites against Tennessee. I'm sure you've seen it. But then they get South Carolina and then LSU, Oklahoma in consecutive weeks. So they're kind of in the middle portion of what you would call their gauntlet of a season. Then they get like East Illinois or Eastern Illinois, whatever, for a layup game before you get the Iron Bowl. But that Iron Bowl is in Jordan-Hare. And Jordan-Hare, for whatever reason, the crazy happens there. It never happens in Tuscaloosa. It's always a blowout there. But in Jordan-Hare, it gets crazy. It gets out of control. So I still lean Alabama, but it's going to be, a 3-loss SEC team is getting in. simply because I don't think there's going to be more than 4 2-loss SEC teams, and I still think there's an avenue that 5 SEC teams get in. I think actually 4 get in, and there's going to be one of those teams is going to be a 3-loss. This Tennessee Bama game in particular, one of these teams is getting a second loss in early October, early to mid October. But I would still lean Alabama because Ty Simpson is a top. You've said it, I've said it. He's a top 3 quarterback in college football. Like right now, it's Mendoza, it's Simpson. You can put him in whatever order that you like. But I thought he made against Missouri some really big throws. That 4th down throw was crazy. His second touchdown, which is very similar to the one that Jaden threw to Zach Ertz on Monday. Like it's just a beautiful, seam route right down.
He sees it. Awesome. He processes very quickly. Yeah. He's a pro quarterback. There's no doubt. And he's got that, toughness to him as well. I want to ask you about a couple of teams. I think Texas Tech is legit. What do you think?
I do think they're legit. I think they would struggle against like really good competition, like if they match up with an SEC team or potentially an Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State. But I think they're really legit. Offensively, they have a bunch of gears that I don't know that many other teams have. So I like them a lot.
All right, we talked about the SEC. A&M right now is the highest ranked SEC team, and they're 6-0. Are you a believer in A&M?
Not really. I
Me
think
neither.
They're getting.
Why are you not a believer?
I'm not a huge Marcel Reed guy yet. I want to see just a little bit more from him before I'm going to put my eggs in the basket. And there is a history component to this too, which is that A&M kind of finds ways to lose games that they shouldn't. I don't anticipate that they're losing this weekend against Arkansas, but then you get LSU, Missouri, South Carolina finish with Texas. I think one of those games they could slip up a little bit. LSU feels like the game they could slip up a little bit. It's going to be on the road. That's a night game in Baton Rouge. So I feel like that would be the one, but I just don't really believe in Marcel Reed. The problem is their defense is really good, and Mike Elko's a hell of a coach. So
they're well coached.
He's like really, really lifting them.
All right. We're talking to Denton, of course, talking college football. I'll tell you right now, and I think I've said this now for a month, I think Miami's the most complete team in college football. What do you think?
I would agree with that. I would put Indiana closer than if you would ask me this a week ago, I would not have said, I would said Miami by a pretty significant margin. I would say Indiana is now at least on the graphic. They're in conversation there, but I would still say right now that Miami is the team. They play on Friday this weekend, which is awesome against Louisville. And if I remember correctly, the game against Louisville last year was in that part of the season where Miami was just escaping with wins on a regular basis. And that was one that Louisville was up, I think, like either 14 or 21 in the second half, and they blew it. I think that one's going to be a fun one. Miami's big favorites. I think they'll win pretty comfortably, but Louisville might keep it a little bit closer than most people think.
I think this is the last opportunity for Notre Dame to be knocked out of the playoff. If they beat USC, I think they're going 10-2, and they're going to be in the playoff. What do you think?
I agree. And they're big favorites. I did not anticipate them to be 9.5. I thought something maybe like a 4.5, 5.5. So 9.5 makes me feel like Notre Dame is the right side there. I think if they win this weekend, they're in.
All right. Your best bets of the week are what?
I was talking to a mutual friend of ours about this literally an hour ago, and I hate that I'm doing this. I don't think a loss will disqualify this particular team, but I do think it makes it difficult. I think I like Duke over Georgia Tech this weekend.
Yeah, I like that too. The ACC is fascinating. I think we talked about this last week, but there's the ACC is incredibly top heavy, and other than Duke playing a lot of these other teams at the top, everybody else plays basically one of the others, and that's it. And you could get into a situation at the end of the season where you've got 3 teams that are undefeated. I don't know what the rules are in terms of who would participate in the ACC title game. What would be interesting about that, Denton, is that it might be better not to participate in the ACC title game if you're an undefeated ACC co-regular season champ.
Yeah.
But we'll deal with that when we get there because there's a lot of football to be played.
Are you guys? Do you want him? Recently fired, Mr. Franklin. You want him? Franklinville sounds good. Has a nice ring to it in College Park.
Oh no! I don't want James Franklin to be the coach in College Park. No, I just have never been a big James Franklin fan ever. All these years in Penn State, he was the coach in waiting for Ralph Region. They had to pay him $1 million.
Yeah, I remember
Debbie Al committed $1 million to him that he would get the job when Ralph retired. Well, Ralph ended up getting fired. And they hired the great Randy Edsall to replace him.
That went well.
No, I look, I'll end with this because I've talked about the Terps a little bit, I think, on Monday's show. This is Loxley's, believe it or not, this is his best team, Denton.
I agree
It's
with
his
that.
most complete team. It's his best coordinated team, offense and defense. They've lost 2 heartbreakers. They too many penalties, too many missed tackles the other day. But I actually think that this is his best team. It's a shame they didn't get at least one of these. I think they're going to win at UCLA Saturday night.
I think they will too. I think the UCLA fad is dying out a little bit.
I don't know, man. That we both couldn't stand Nico High wherever he's been, but he is a runner, man. He is an athlete. That's for sure.
The offensive coordinator is legit out there.
Yeah, Neuheisel's son.
Yeah.
All right. I'll talk to you. Thanks.
All right, see ya.
Coming up, Steve Suter. You'll hear his top 3 graded and bottom 3 graded offensive and defensive players when we return. Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Steve Suter, one of the greatest punt returners in NCAA history, played for Maryland's teams in the early 2000s, calls Maryland games with Johnny Holiday. He'll be on the call tomorrow night, 7 o'clock kick, 6 o'clock pregame, right here on your home for Maryland football, the Team 980. Steve's been doing film breakdown of the Skins games, and he's excellent. Really, really good. Somebody mentioned to me last week, he not only does it like Cooley used to do it, he sounds like Cooley. I don't think that's true. I don't think he sounds like Cooley, but there is stylistically a similarity in the way Cooley looked at games and broke them down off the all-22 and the way Steve does it. So Steve comes on my podcast every Wednesday and breaks down the whole game, breaks down Jaden. I'm going to play the portion of his film breakdown where he gives you the top 3 highest graded offensive and defensive players and the bottom 3 graded from his standpoint, offensive and defensive players. He started with the offense.
3 highest go to number 1, McNichols. He was fantastic, especially blitz pickup time after time. He was tracking linebackers across multiple offensive linemen to pick them up, and he was stoning them when he did. You mentioned the big third down. That was a huge play in the game where he had to get most of it on his own and then finish off the run to get the first down. And I even dinged him for his drop pass on the other third down. I don't think it was going to be a big play, but he still got dinged for it. So he was really solid for me offensively, and he led the way. Number two is, I'm a broken record here, Chris Paul. Another solid game by him. He's the best lineman on the field each week for Washington. And then Biotic came in third. Those are my top three. And Biotic has been playing really solid too. And now I'll transition here to the three lowest, and I guess I'll say for that. So the three lowest go to Chris Moore, not only from the drop pass, so it should have been a first down, but blocking, he didn't help out a lot at all. A couple times he was asked to set the edge, and he was the reason the play didn't work. So he was getting dinged on those plays. Connerly, not his best game, not his worst game, but he's in the bottom three, Connerly Jr. And then Wiley, by far the worst player on the field offensively. And that's back-to-back games he's been on the bottom for me. I forget the all-world guard that you say you have coming back. Maybe for Washington,
Sam Cosme, hopefully, yeah.
So you need – when could he be coming back? Because they need to insert him.
It could be this week. It could be this week. He's in that 21-day where you've got the opportunity to, activate him.
Okay.
He tore his ACL in the playoff game against the Lions last year.
Oh,
so,
okay. I didn't know.
So that's the it basically the normal recovery is late September, early October. So here we are. But yes, and by the way, his position is right guard. So you need him. Yeah, so there's been some question among some of the people that cover the team. Will he come in for Paul or will he come in for Wiley?
Oh, he's not coming in. He is not coming in for Paul.
Yeah.
If he comes in for Paul, I have lost all faith and trust in anybody that knows anything about football over there.
Okay, yeah. I
don't know how obvious I can say it. He's your best lineman on the field. Tunzel's a close second, or no, I'd say Biotic is second. Tunzel's the third if I'm ranking them. But Chris Paul does not mess up, and he mauls guys consistently. He better not leave the field or stop watching the game.
You were the first one you did. You're like, this dude Allegretti and this dude Brandon Coleman, they might need to sit. And they ended up sitting the following week. And Brandon.
So Wiley's been so bad the last 2 weeks. Yeah. Maybe they bring Allegretti back in.
Yeah, maybe, because Coleman's been just flat out inactive. He hasn't been active on game days. Allegretti has been, I think, active on most of these game days.
You can say this with complete confidence that he's going in at right guard when he comes back for Wiley. He is not coming in for Paul.
So the Chris Moore thing is interesting to me. Although the touchdown catch, it wasn't a clean catch. It was a perfect ball, and he really kind of caught it. And he's lucky he held on to it. But he did do a good job of getting the knee down.
Yeah, and I gave him points for it. He gets credit for it. I did not give him the points he should earn for that play. It's a good play. It's a good catch. He just was not a factor and not in the run game the rest of the way. And then the drop, I give the same score there for the touchdown and the drop, because you don't know you're going to get the fourth down the next play. So essentially, and I say this on the broadcast when I'm doing Marin all the time, a third down drop to me is a turnover. You're punting the ball now. Yeah. So because you dropped the ball, you didn't get the first down, I consider it a turnover. I think it should be a stat. It's not a pick, it's not a fumble, but it is a turnover because you're giving the ball back. So for the same points you got for the touchdown, they get erased for the third down drop, and then he just had some other bad plays.
Then I know what's coming on defense, because Quan Martin basically turned the ball over by not tackling Swift on the 55-yard touchdown. But we'll get to that in a moment. I wanted to ask you about Zach Ertz, because you have basically, since you started doing this, you are not an Ertz guy. It's very clear that you're not, or based on the games that he's played so far. What did you think of his game Monday night?
He's out of my bottom three.
Yeah, no, he's
I'll
not.
Tell you what I thought. Yeah, so he did great. He was one of, well, I would say great, but he is, he's just under the top three, and it's because he made plays in the passing game. He wasn't asked to do much from a block. Actually, I highlighted this. The play right before the Jaden pick.
Okay.
Do you? I don't have that timestamp.
It's first
right.
quarter. It is 6:17. The play before.
First quarter.
Okay, the play before, is 6:50.
Yeah. So this is the most aggressive Ertz has been all year in run blocking. He cuts this guy as he comes across the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
Watch this.
Yeah.
He has to. He's asked. You have to block this guy. He's a DN. I know you don't want to do it, but you have to. He goes low and he chops his leg out. Now, does this guy still technically get in on the tackle? Yeah.
You think he's just not really interested at this age in doing a lot of blocking?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to do it. This is the only probably plus grade I've given him on a run play all season.
Right.
And I gave it to him. I mean, he gets credit. I'm asking a lot of you to come across and take on a D end, and he does it, and he gets him on the ground. That's a successful block if I get you on the ground.
What did you
so
think?
Let's give him his props there.
Yeah. What did you think of Krosky Merritt? What did you think of Bill in this game?
I think Bill. I'm not ready to hand the keys to him, just like I wasn't ready to hand the keys to him after the Chargers game. I'm a big fan of McNichols. And he's growing on me more and more. Bill's coming along. He's pass protection is getting better. He had one that was his fault where the pocket broke down, but he's also standing up too. I got no issues with Bill. I'm just not ready to give him the keys. I think McNichols still earned some touches, and I think you've seen it. He's got big third down potential. He's the last 2 weeks getting first downs, and it's not just that. His pass blocking, his blitz pickup is better. It's really good, actually. Got good hands other than the drop, and I think he's got some shake in him too. It's just a different kind of shake.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with Bill coming along. I'm all for it. I mean, he looks good, but don't stop giving the ball to Nichols. Just don't stop giving him reps. Now, I did make this other note. This is your second time fumbling, Bill, in back-to-back weeks. And you know what coaches do to this? Coaches just rewind that film and then say, this guy's a fumbler, rewinds it. This guy's a fumbler, rewind it. This guy's a fumbler, and they'll just repeat that. And now the defenses each week are now going to think, and it's just going to be part of their tackling, is they're going to think Bill's a fumbler. So you got to overcome that, because once defenses smell that blood, then they're going to come after it. So he's going to have to do a good job of figuring out how to not fumble again and try to erase that narrative that he has now.
All right. Defensive top three, bottom three.
Top three defense go to Kinlaw, Louvu, and Darnell Savage. Played well. I was a fan of him. And then Armstrong, honorable mention. He's right there. They're basically the same score, but those are my top three. Bottom three go to Wagner. Just caught too much in pass coverage and out in space and not getting it done. But he made up for it a little bit in the run game here and there, so he kind of bounces out, but he's still my bottom three. Preston Smith, he's just nothing out there right now, so he's got to be in there. And then by far was Sanders still, and it's just from all the mistakes in man coverage and not covering, getting lost in coverage. I dinged him for dropping that interception. That interception was the easiest one he's probably going to have all season, and he dropped it down there on the goal line. The one he caught last week was much more difficult.
Right.
So you got to make that play, because that's points coming off the board if you make that play. And he's just a liability in man coverage. So he rounds out the bottom.
Sanders still the lowest graded defensive player, and the lowest graded offensive player was Wiley. Man, you like McNichols. By the way, they love McNichols.
I do like him.
They love him.
I like him. That was good.
And I think it's one of the. Look, Bill ended up getting 17 carries in this game, which is the most for him. But that fumble, it's a good hit by Sweat to knock it out. But to your point, they're going to be searching for it now.
Yes,
all right. What else that I haven't asked you about or you haven't mentioned?
I think we got it, man. Covered it. They need to get Terry back. They need to find a way to get more dynamic on the edge with winning man coverage, or they're just going to be, there's just going to be too much on Jalen moving forward the rest of the season. If they have another game like this where the run game isn't taking up chunk yardage like it was.
Oh, by the way, I thought because of that egregious missed tackle on Swift on the 55-yard touchdown pass that Martin was going to be a bottom threer for you.
Yeah. Well, he got dinged on it for sure. I gave him the equivalent of giving up a touchdown because he did. Now he gets picked again too. It's just I don't know why
he did get.
Well, I don't know why him and Lattimore just they can't stay out of each other's way.
I know.
Crazy.
All right, great job on short turnaround. Appreciate it so much.
Man.
We'll talk next week.
All right, thanks, Kevin.
Steve Suter with his 3 highest and 3 lowest offensive and defensive. I think, look, he has said this now for a few weeks running that you can't take Chris Paul off the field. He believes that Chris Paul, pound for pound right now, has been their best offensive lineman. He likes Tunsil and he likes Biotish a lot as well. And so when Cosme comes back, I agree as well. I think most of you do too. It's going to be at his right guard spot for Wiley. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Now, what I didn't ask him was, is it possible Wiley plays some for Connerly Jr.? Connerly Jr. has been okay, and he's grown from those first few games. But he loves Chris Paul. And the first film breakdown he did was after the Packers game, and he said they've got issues at guard, both guards, with Coleman and with Allegretti. And it was literally the following week. Chris Paul was in, Wiley was in, and Coleman was inactive. I don't think anybody saw that coming, in camp. Chris Paul sort of etching himself into the starting lineup. I thought there was something he said, and I didn't push back on it then, and I should have. The 4th and 2 that they picked up with McNichols, the play before that, he really dinged Chris Moore for a drop. I've gone back and watched that a couple times. I should have pressed him on it a little bit. The ball's high. It's a high throw to Chris Moore. And last week, he did the same thing with Ertz. Remember, before the end of the half, what got them into that bind, before they punted and had the roughing the punter in the end zone, was kind of a high ball to Ertz. And he said, no. That ball was a catchable ball last week by Ertz. And this one, a tiny bit high, but catchable for Chris Moore. And he said, at some point, because maybe it was earlier in the film breakdown, he said Chris Moore now has two big drops in 2 weeks. They picked up the 4th and 2, but they were forced to go for the 4th and 2 after that drop. I've gone back and watched that a few times. Man, it's a borderline high throw. He also said about the touchdown to McCaffrey, he basically said that's all Deebo Samuel. He said the threat of Deebo in the bubble, like he said, this play works a lot, at different levels, but if it's Jalen Lane or if it's, Moore running the bubble, it doesn't draw up almost every single defender. It's because it's Deebo. And that leaves basically the choice for the deep safety to play either Ertz or to play McCaffrey. They went with Ertz, and McCaffrey was wide open for the touchdown. He did a complete breakdown of Jaden's game, really liked Jaden's game. He essentially said, look, for right now, he's got nothing out there. Nobody's getting consistent separation. There's not a lot of options on a lot of the dropbacks, and he's making things happen. But, of course, he dinged him significantly for the fumble and said that was the play that cost them the game for sure. I'll tell you what, he is a big Kinlaw fan. Kinlaw and Armstrong, he is a big fan of, that is for sure. Steve Suter doing a really good job with the film breakdown stuff. And I think I've mentioned this to you because some of you have asked me. He was a Redskins fan, grew up a Redskins fan, just doesn't have that same passion for it anymore, and now is much more of an NFL fan for a lot of the same reasons that, some have kind of drifted away. He also, played and had, was in multiple camps, including the Washington camp, played in the CFL for a while, had a lot of injuries. Steve Suter was one of those 4-3 guys that just was an absolute touchdown waiting to happen as a receiver or as a punt returner every time he was on the field in college. Real quickly, Washington's, they just sent out a press release. Drake Jackson, the guy that they signed who's been injured for the last year and a half, who was a second-round pick with the 49ers, defensive end, pass rusher, actually had some productivity when he was healthy before the injury. Washington did sign him yesterday, and today they put him on IR. I guess maybe they knew he was going to have to go on IR, but maybe there was some competition for Drake Jackson, and they wanted to get him signed. The other thing, too, Ben texted this to me early this morning, and I don't think I'm sharing this out of school because I think he may have tweeted it out. But he said that that Traylon Burks, who they had in to work out, apparently looked good. Came in at a decent weight. Looked good speed wise. He's a bigger receiver. Burks is. We'll see if they end up signing him. There are some, kind of as we approach midseason and approach the trade deadline, which I think is that. I think it's that Tuesday, first weekend in November, maybe Election Day, which is the trade deadline. There's a lot of suggestions with Washington in those suggestions, especially when it comes to receiver. So we'll see if they're active again. They were active last year. Let's get through the next game or two to see where they are, to see if we think they should be buyers at the trade deadline. Terry's return is going to be crucial. Suter was emphasized, look, McCaffrey's fine and Jalen Lane's fine and Chris Moore's fine. Debo's special, but is like they're not putting any sort of fear into defensive secondaries. And I think that's why we saw a significant blitz, percentage from the Bears in the game on Monday night. They didn't fear anybody in the back end. Look, Terry's not a big separator. He's a great contested catch guy, we know, but he also has a bit of a reputation and can certainly threaten defenses vertically. They need another legitimate receiver on the field, and Terry would certainly give him that. We'll see if it ends up happening this weekend. We'll know more about that, I guess, today, but probably won't know definitively until tomorrow. And by the way, Debo's on the injury report again, and I didn't think he looked 100 in the game Monday night. I thought he looked fine against the Chargers. I did not think he looked great physically against the Bears. All right, we'll do some fantasy football talk with Charch next. Church likes this. Paul Charchian, every Thursday, 11:25 with us, talking fantasy football and a lot more. Many of you enjoy the other conversation more than the football conversation, or the other football conversation more than just the fantasy football conversation. But we will get to fantasy football conversation. But first, let me remind all of you that Paul Charchian is one of the world-renowned fantasy football experts in the U.S. He has podcasts called Fantasy Football Weekly and Chop. You can hear him on KFan in Minneapolis and a lot of other places, and you can follow him on X, on Twitter, at Paul Charchian, CharChian. Before we get to some of the football and some of the things that you want to give people some heads up on, just real quickly, are the Vikings in trouble quarterback-wise, like with potentially Wentz and J.J. McCarthy out against the Eagles?
Yeah, it's a possibility. JJ's all but out. I think they're being unusually coy. Vikings normally as transparent a football team as there is on almost everything, including injuries. And Kevin, they've been weirdly evasive all week. We've only learned in the last, about 18 hours that J.J. McCarthy's ankle is still a problem. I mean, this must have been a severely sprained high ankle, or he had a setback on it at some point. Well, because now it looks like this thing's going to go out 6 weeks, which is a long time. And so McCarthy probably not available. Wentz has got a shoulder injury. This is a team coming out of a bye, by the way. Now, Wentz finished last week's game, but the fact that he's still got the shoulder is a problem, and that would leave Max Brosmer as your starting quarterback.
The Minnesota quarterback, the University of Minnesota quarterback.
Yes, I mean, a shocking story. It's University of Minnesota's quarterback last year. He had previously played, I think, Vermont for 3 or 4 years.
He was good last year.
He was shockingly good. He does not have a big arm, but he can read a field and throw a very accurate pass. And he was an undrafted free agent who just tore up training camp and preseason games. And so they kept the spot for Brosmer. They did not expose him to waivers. And he would be the starter for the Vikings if it looks like if Carson Wentz can't go. And it's the Eagles off 2 losses. I would not like the Vikings' chances in that scenario very much.
Yeah, I remember watching him play Maryland last year, and I'm like, this guy just has a little bit of that processing, quick, release pro kind of, potential. And there he is, as the third stringer in Minnesota. I guess one of the reasons I brought it up is, do you think there's concern already about J.J. McCarthy?
Oh, there is in Minnesota, for sure. So keep in mind, at this time last year, on roster, let's go to the end of last year. On roster, this team had Daniel Jones, who they let go for no compensation, who is now obviously Indianapolis' best record in the AFC. They had Sam Darnold, who has been nothing short of fantastic for Seattle. And honestly, both of those guys are not out of the MVP conversation. The Vikings had an opportunity to go some other way in the offseason, but they ultimately landed on J.J. McCarthy as their guy. And to this point, since the moment they drafted J.J. McCarthy 2 Aprils ago, he has been available and healthy for 2 games, and he finished one of them with a high ankle sprain and got knocked out. So, I mean, in Minnesota, there's a lot of people that are pretty dubious about the process and where the Vikings landed, and it may not work out well.
Well, look, people hate when I do this because he's a very polarizing figure in this town, and he was very polarizing in your town as well. But I think I bet if you injected Kevin O'Connell with truth serum and Kwesi, the GM, they would have gone back and said, yeah, let's give Kirk a little bit more than just 1 year and a little bit of comfort that we're not going to go out and draft his replacement and have him hanging over his head for the next 2 years. Because I think Kirk would have had the same kind of year Sam Darnold had. I believe that.
Obviously I was a strong Kirk defender.
Yeah.
But coming off that Achilles injury last year, the ball velocity had dropped a lot, and he might have that back now. You're off of that, but at his age, I think they made the right decision there. I think the one that's going to hurt him was not keeping Sam Darnold. I think that's, at the end of the day, Darnold ended up being a relatively affordable quarterback who is proving with Seattle that he can absolutely power an offense. And the Vikings took these 2 bad losses at the end of last year, but the dude was crushed behind an offensive line that was doing nothing. Nobody would have survived that. In retrospect, I think the right play was to keep Darnold and McCarthy and just figure it out from there.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that Cousins was lighting it up in Atlanta through the first 9 weeks of the season, and I think he got hurt again. I think that there were a couple of other injuries there, kind of, game 9, game 10, but whatever. I think Darnold, we talked about this at the time. I don't know that anybody in recent memory lost more money based on 2 performances, his last 2 of last year against Detroit and in the playoff game against the Rams, than Sam Darnold did. And look, he's playing great. They've got a good team in Seattle around him, just like Minnesota was a good team around him last year. And he's thriving once again, but he lost a lot of money in those 2 games.
No, a ton. His contract value probably dropped in half.
Exactly.
He's still doing all right. I think he's in the ballpark of $30 million a year, something like that. But he could have, it could have been near the top. I mean, if he had played great ball in those final 2 games, Vikings roll into the postseason as the number 1 seed on what would have been then 15 wins. Yeah. That would have been a whole different conversation for him. And I think at that point, the Vikings would have had to have kept Sam Darnold.
So do you know the answer to the following question? The last time we had 2 40-year-old plus quarterbacks going head-to-head in a regular season game?
I have not seen the answer.
I thought for sure you would have this.
Let me start there. So okay. The answer is not never.
2020. I'll give you that. 2020.
Oh, so it's that recently.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it happened 3 times in the same season.
Brady. All right. So Brady's got to be involved, right? Or
correct.
Is he even 40 then? He wasn't. Okay. So it's Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger?
No, they played 3 times that year, so it's got to be in the same division.
In division. All right. So it wasn't a Bills quarterback. It wasn't a Jets quarterback.
No, he was in Tampa. He was in Tampa. You're forgetting.
Oh, he's in Tampa at that point. Oh, right. At that point, he was in Tampa in 2020.
Yeah.
Wasn't Falcons quarterback. Okay. Wasn't. Oh, Drew Brees.
Drew Brees.
That's
yep.
Thank you.
They played 3 times, including in the playoffs in 2020. And recall, New Orleans actually had a legitimate shot against Tampa in that game. Legitimate shot, just like Green Bay did. But yeah, they played 3 times that year. Brees against Brady, both older than 40 years old. We get that tonight. I asked you last week whether or not Joe Flacco would be a legitimate fantasy play, because one thing we know about Flacco, he will give Higgins and Chase opportunities. He is fearless. And we saw that in the second half. He was throwing the ball all over Lambeau. And Chase had one of his biggest days. So is he, if you've got him, is he worth starting tonight?
Joe Flacco?
That's what I said.
No. We're not starting Joe Flacco. And, for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is it's all dump-off stuff from him. And it's, Flacco did get to 2 touchdowns last week, only 219 yards today. And
in a half.
First game is the
Bengals.
In a half. First game is the Bengals. They asked him to throw 45 times. But the problem with Flacco is it's all just dink and dunk stuff from his first tight ends. And this is the play. The play tonight is Cincinnati tight end Noah Fant. So they're short 2 tight ends, Mike Gesicki and Tanner Hudson. They normally do a rotation of 3 tight ends, but 2 of them are out. Noah Fant's the last tight end standing. Joe Flacco, in 5 games with Cleveland, the Browns had the second most targets to tight ends, and Njoku and Fannin. Yeah. Last week, Flacco's debut in Cincinnati, he threw to his tight ends 11 times, and he's playing the Steelers last week. They got targeted 17 times by opposing tight ends. So it's all sitting on Noah Fant. That to me is the play here in this passing offense.
Talk about Aaron Rodgers' season so far. I was a Pittsburgh believer before the season started because I didn't think he was the issue last year in New York, and I thought the fit might be an interesting one. For those that haven't watched the Steelers, they're 4-1. They have a chance to get to 5-1. By the way, they are now the favorite, boys and girls, to win the AFC North. Last week, as a 3-1 with Baltimore 1-4, the Ravens were still favored to win the AFC North. But the Steelers are now the current slight favorite to win the AFC North. But talk about Rodgers and the Pittsburgh offense so far this year.
It's not the narrative people wanted. We wanted to do the Aaron Rodgers is washed up. He's awful. The reality is he's played well. He is a top 10 quarterback in these key metrics: touchdown passes, completion percentage, passer rating, interceptions. He's only thrown 3 interceptions all year. And I bet 90% of your listeners, as astute as they are, Kevin, can't name his number 2 receiver. And almost nobody can name his number 3 receiver. You might have one person driving around who's related to Roman Wilson, who knows who the number 3 receiver is.
Yeah, he was the kid at Michigan. Yeah,
he was the kid at Michigan. He is the number 3 receiver on the Steelers by virtue of his 2 catches. That's how fast the drop off is after DK Metcalf and Calvin Austin, who's out for this game, by the way. No Calvin Austin, that hurts, but the Bengals pass defense, every bit as bad as you think they would be. They're 30th in passing yards allowed. They're 27th in passing touchdowns allowed. Every opposing passer is scored. So in all probability, Aaron Rodgers is going to find his way to a decent box score here.
Yeah. Anybody that paid attention to the Jets last year, it was not on him. He was still slinging it like Aaron Rodgers. His mobility isn't what it once was. That's 100% true. But, God, that ball comes out quickly, and it is just as accurate as it's always been. And Metcalf really is something else for him. He was always bringing, the Alan Lazards and all of the, old Packer guys to New York. This Metcalf trade and the fit with Rodgers appears to be a good one, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, he's the guy who loves to pelt his number 1 receiver with targets, whether you go back to Green Bay, Devontae Adams. Then you go to the Jets, Devontae Adams. And then, Garrett Wilson just languishing last year, and now Wilson's been really, really good, even bad quarterbacking. And now it's all DK Metcalf. And to his credit, he can find – defense knows it's coming. And every defense goes in, and when they're playing the Steelers, goes, okay, we're not letting DK Metcalf beat us. He's going to have to go beat us with Calvin Austin or Jonnu Smith or somebody else. And he does it anyway. He still finds ways to get the ball to his number 1 receiver and then somebody else as a helper as well. So, yeah, Rodgers has played shockingly well, and DK Metcalf has been a key here. Now, there's a lot of people who think, and I'm one of them, Steelers who have this path to go win the division are going to trade for a wideout. I think that's a very real possibility. Chris Olave could be a target. Rashid Shaheed on the same team could be targets. I mean, there's a lot of guys we could look at, but don't be surprised if Pittsburgh's a buyer for wide receiver help in what looks like a playoff season.
They use a couple of things just if for people who haven't been paying attention. So they beat Minnesota, over in an international game. And Kenneth Gainwell ended up having a big game for Jaylen Warren. Warren had a big game last week. Pittsburgh's running the football much better, which is a big, big help for Rodgers. And then they've got this dude from Georgia, Darnell Washington. Has anybody seen this guy? He's 6'8".
He's amazing.
He's like 6'8" and 270, and he's a tight end. And he could end up being a bit of a household name, I think, before the end of this season, because Rodgers feels very comfortable throwing him the football.
So, okay, I love that you know who Darnell Washington is, and I love talking about this guy. On draft day 2 years ago, I was like, I want him to be my team, the Vikings. I'd love to see Darnell Washington make his way to the Vikings. And so I've been tracking him really closely. The tight end situation with the Steelers is so effed up. It's ridiculous. So they had Pat
because
Fryer,
they have so many.
They have too many, I think. But this is an Arthur Smith thing, right? They had They had Pat Fryermuth, who was good last year. He was 9th in fantasy points last year. They were using him extensively. And then for reasons I do not know, on either side of the trade, they acquired Jonnu Smith, who was crushing for Miami. He went to the Pro Bowl last year, and they added Jonnu Smith in. Now, with Jonnu Smith and Pat Fryermuth and Darnell Washington, we've got a New Guinea level of cannibalization happening with these tight ends. And now none of them get enough to be very impactful, but Darnell Washington is so fun to watch because he is 6'8" and 300 pounds, and he's rumbling down the field. He's an awesome blocker. He can catch. He can run after the catch. Jonnu Smith is fantastic as well. I'm a long-time fan.
He is. And he was with Arthur Smith in Tennessee, right? So that's the fit there.
Correct. It is. But he's only getting 3 catches a game. So I wish it was a simpler situation with that tight end room that you're going to see tonight. But Darnell Washington is just a freaking blast.
This is actually a very interesting game in a division that if Cincinnati could win at home tonight, obviously it's contingent on Burrow at some point coming back. But they have a schedule that really sets up favorably if they got this one. They got a bunch of home games, I believe, in a row. And they could stay in the mix until Burrow gets back, if he gets back. Thursday night games, you're looking for something. And we've had a couple of good Thursday night games this year. And tonight is an interesting one, that's for sure. All right. Got to ask you about Rico Dowdle. Because I was a Chuba Hubbard fan. And also, I thought Dallas made a mistake letting Rico Dowdle go. He actually had some really good games for the Cowboys when they turned away from Zeke. Remember, they went with Zeke at the beginning of last year. Zeke's done. And Dowdle ended up having a really good season, which is why he got the contract. He got these opportunities the last 2 weeks because Chuba Hubbard was out. What happens when Hubbard comes back?
Yeah, and expected to be back this week. He is practicing with Carolina. Chuba Hubbard, 473 total yards in 2 weeks. That is more than Saquon Barkley all year. And because I know you love these kind of
You mean Rico Dowdle, the yardage in 2 weeks.
Dowdle. Yeah.
You
Rico
said Hubbard.
Dowdle, 473. Thank you very much. Thank you for the correction. In the past 55 years, so going back to 1970 when they started keeping real stats, you want to guess how many guys have run and caught for as many yards as Rico Dowdle has in a 2-game stretch?
Not many, but I would guess that, somebody like Chuck Foreman, going way back to the day, could have been in that mix. Kamara, Dunn, Falk. Go ahead, give me the list.
Yeah, you're hitting the right guys. It's 2 people. It's Walter Payton and Saquon Barkley. That's it. Those are the 2 people in the last 55 years to put up as many rushing and receiving yards in a 2-game stretch as Rico Dowdle just did. And now we've got Chuba Hubbard coming back. It's not like Carolina, by the way, a juggernaut offense. You just drop Rico Dowdle in and he just does what everybody else does in that offense. Chuba Hubbard has struggled in this offense. I'm worried we're going to get the dreaded hot hand, Kevin. That they're going to be like, all right, Chuba Hubbard is an incumbent. We just signed him to a new extension at the end of last year. They don't want to demoralize the kid, so they'll give him a chance. They'll give Rico Dowdle a chance, and then they go with the hot hand. And that's, from a fantasy standpoint, we hate that.
Yeah, right. I actually think Canales knows what he's doing. He's the guy that resuscitated Geno Smith in Seattle. He's the guy that really got Baker going in Tampa. And they actually are pretty, stout, both defensively and offensively in the trenches. I mean, Derek Brown is a problem. It's one of those things where it's like you look at the standings, and I've been talking about it for the last couple of weeks, Charch, but the NFC is just loaded. And then it's like, what? Carolina's 3-3? And look, they beat a terrible Dallas defense and Miami the week before, but I think he's a good coach. I think he's doing a good job with that offense.
The single biggest thing that the Panthers have changed from last year to this year is their secondary has gotten so much better. They've turned into one of the hardest teams in the NFL to pass against. The Panthers.
Interesting.
Nobody thinks the Panthers this way. They put a first-round pick into J.C. Horn a few years ago, and he kept getting hurt. He wasn't able to get on the field. He's been great. Mike Jackson, their other cornerback, has been great. And so that team, their pass defense, to me, is the big thing that's been different. We haven't had Bryce Young looking quite as good as he did at the end of last year, but it's starting to look less awful. And Ted McMillan starting to show up. They get one of the players that we were really excited about at the end of last year, Jalen Coker at wide receiver, has missed this whole season on IR. Yeah. He made play in this game, and they're getting healthy there. So the Panthers are a little bit plucky in a very weird division, and 500 have a chance.
They can run the football, and they stop the run. You know, Derek Brown is a beast in that run game. Mm-hmm. They stop the run and they run the football, and we know, and we've been around long enough to know that those teams actually tend to compete and have chances. All right, yes. Rashee Rice. How quickly does he get inserted back into it and start getting targets? Probably right away. So he comes back from suspension, and it's just a critical component of that Chiefs offense. And and the 6-week suspension is never a good thing, but we tend to forget he was coming off major knee injury. And so this added more rehab time to that season-ending injury, and he should be at 100%. It was not an ACL; it was PCL and LCL. So he should be in a really good stretch. And as a reminder for Rashee Rice, Kevin, last year he played 3 weeks. He was the highest scoring fantasy receiver in those 3 weeks. He was number one. And he gets a nice matchup against a middle-of-the-pack Raiders secondary on Sunday. But the real maybe talking point on Rashee Rice is when he erases 7, 8, 9, 10 targets from the other Chiefs receivers, what happens? Travis Kelce, during those 3 weeks, last year when Rashee Rice was healthy, he didn't score a touchdown. He had a 34-yard game, a 0-yard game, and a 30-yard game for Travis Kelce. Losing those targets affected Kelce a lot. And then he's never really been out in the field with this version of Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy and him they were never starters together. So that'll be fascinating to see as well, because Worthy's been great. And now they get Rice and Worthy together. We'll watch and see what those two do together. But the guys who get evaporated, Hollywood Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster were fantasy helpers to this point. The return of Rashee Rice makes those guys pretty much droppable. All right, let's finish with our game. Can both teams just keep their punters inactive for this game?
Well, that's going to be, I think, a lot of what's coming in your game is we're going to see a ton of offense. Obviously, Dallas is this is a really bad defense. You can beat a variety of different ways. Dallas has got the highest, most yards per game out of any offense. So yeah, this is shootout coming. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt potentially sitting on a really nice game here. Are we going to get Terry McLaurin back?
Maybe. Well, I mean, I think there's a decent chance. Yeah. Is CeeDee Lamb going to be back?
CeeDee Lamb's likely to be back for this game. Watch Jake Ferguson, who has turned into the most targeted tight end in the league. He's got the most receptions out of any tight end. Jake Ferguson in the middle of having a fantastic season. Yeah, it's funny. You know, he was there with Cooper Rush for that second half of last year.
He's got 44 receptions in 6 games. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. It is. Cooper Rush totally ignored him. But back with Dak Prescott, Ferguson has been a huge part of that offense.
Yeah. What happens to Pickens with Lamb back?
Well, he's been unbelievable.
He really has.
One of fantasy football's highest scoring players. What I think what it's really going to help do is for defenses that come in like yours, you can't just say we're going to take CeeDee Lamb off the field and make you beat us other ways, because Pickens will just go do that. And what Pickens has also done is he's opened up deep passing that CeeDee Lamb had never given the Dallas offense. As great as CeeDee Lamb is, he is short and middle routes is his wheelhouse. Pickens wants you just go deep and let your guy go get it. So you can't, and you don't want one-on-one with a 5'10" quarterback who's, or safety that's trying to guard Pickens, because he'll win that battle 9 times out of 10. So it creates a lot of stress on opposing defenses to have both those guys on the field in a way that we really haven't seen since week 2 when CeeDee Lamb got hurt.
Last Cowboys are 2-3-1. They've only had 2 home games. The final scores of both games 40-37 in overtime and 40-40 in overtime. We could get something like that on Sunday. Charch, thanks as always.
This has been a ton of fun as always. Talk to you next week, my man.
Paul Charchi and everybody. I've got a what do you got when we come back, and then at 12, some potential trade deadline opportunities for Washington that are getting written about. We'll talk about that. We've got power rankings coming up next hour as well. Don't forget all of our NFL talk. As always, brought to you by Paramount Plus. You can't count on much, but you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. Watch your local NFL game live every Sunday all season long. Visit ParamountPlus.com/NFL to get started today. I saw this story, very sad story. It was a story of a boxer, Ricky Hatton, who committed suicide. Apparently, they're ruling that last Thursday. He was a former boxing world champion. Ricky Hatton, I saw him fight twice in Vegas. I saw him fight Mayweather at the MGM, and I saw him fight Manny Pacquiao at the MGM. And I'm telling you, the scenes in the building leading up to that fight at the MGM Grand, if you've ever been to the MGM, it is the largest casino in Vegas, or it was at the time. They've got that arena, the MGM Grand Garden Arena, attached to that. And when the Brits come in and fight, it is just a scene. And by the way, leads to, a lot of extracurricular, especially late at night. But the singing and the hero that Ricky Hatton had become, and he didn't really have much of a shot against Mayweather. He got TKO'd in the 10th. But, man, they thought old Ricky Hatton was going to pull it off. And then Pacquiao knocked him out in the second round. But he had a distinguished career, ended up 45-3, won the title multiple times. And I saw this story the other day that he committed suicide by hanging in his home, 46 years old, from Greater Manchester, England. Really some memories of being out there for work. We were out there for work for a lot of those fights. A lot of the Pacquiao and Mayweather fights, HBO would send out basically every sports talk radio station in the country, set them up in the hotel, set them up on Radio Row. And, you could do your normal show, but you'd have to interview a boxer or two. And we had Ricky Hatton, actually, Tommy and I had him on the show. He was a character and had those incredibly loyal British fans. When the Brits have a champion or a championship contender, it is quite the scene in Las Vegas. Never forget those two fights and being out in Vegas for those two Ricky Hatton fights. This from, where is it? This from Owen. Owen wrote, Kevin, love your show as always. The Jaden fumble was gut-wrenching. You're 100% the defense needs to make a stop there, et cetera. He said, in my head, with about 1:40 left on the clock, I just knew we weren't going to stop them from getting into field goal range and kicking a game-winning field goal. So I wanted us to let them score. It's crazy to think that when you're up by 2 in a game, that they're driving on your 50-yard line to let them score with a minute plus left. Yeah, look, I mean, I was kind of hoping they'd get a stop, Owen. I thought maybe, it's Chicago, it's Caleb. Maybe he'll misfire. Maybe they'll get a stop. Maybe the kicker, and I think that's the thing where I would say, no, you can't do that. Sure. First of all, I don't think they would have scored. I think you'd had Swift run down to the 3-yard line and slide, and then they'd eat the clock the other way. But yeah, I think the kicker was the part here where there was always a chance, given his recent history, that he was going to miss the kick. That's why I was so just repulsed by that last drive. Because you had a kicker, I know he had made some kicks that night. He had also had one blocked that basically came down below the center's butt. It was so low off his foot. This guy's had major issues. So if you made that kick a 48, 49, 50-yard kick, it was probably 50-50 at best that he was going to make it. But there was no resistance. Absolutely no resistance on that final defensive drive of the game. All right, when we come back, we've got NFL power rankings for the week. Again, not an easy week to pick the top 5 teams in the league, but Max and I will try to do it when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app. You can take us anywhere you want, anywhere. Listen to us whenever you want, and you can watch us. We stream the show on the Team 980's YouTube page. Hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there. Got to get Joe Witt out of there. All right, power rankings 1 through 5. Tough again this week, although I actually, and I think I said this on Monday's show before Washington played Chicago, but off of the Sunday night game, that I think we were watching a preview of the Super Bowl on Sunday Night Football. There's a long way to go, obviously, but both of those teams, I think Kansas City's starting to hit their stride. They're getting healthier. If they stay healthy, I think they're going to be the favorites by the time we get to December, if they're not the favorites already. I haven't even looked at a recent Super Bowl favorite list. Is Detroit the favorite right now? I'll find it real quickly. I would imagine Kansas City and Detroit are near the top of the list. And Buffalo's probably still there as well. Super Bowl odds. Yeah, Buffalo barely the favorite at plus 640 over Kansas City at plus 650. Then it's the Packers at plus 750 and Detroit at plus 810. And then you get into big separation. The Eagles are, plus 1100. The Rams are basically plus 1400. Denver and Indy are climbing. Tampa's climbing. Washington's all the way back at plus 2800 now. I think Kansas City and Detroit, I think we saw a preview. The best chance of a preview for the Super Bowl. And since Kansas City won that game, I got the Chiefs at number 1 in my power rankings. I'm going in this order. Sorry, I'm not counting it down from 5. And I've got Detroit at 2. By the way, Detroit on Monday Night Football coming up this week. We've got another, by the way, a good doubleheader. And it's a legit doubleheader. It's a 7 o'clock kick and a 10 o'clock kick on Monday night. Tampa at Detroit, and then Houston at Seattle. It's a pretty good Monday night doubleheader. It might be the last of the doubleheaders. I may be wrong about that. I'm not sure. But I got Tampa Bay at 3. After that, man, it is really hard to come up with 4 and 5. There are so many possibilities. I'm going Green Bay at 4. And even though this was one of the more hideous games of the week, I think defensively this team is nasty, and I think they are potentially good enough on offense. I'm moving the Denver Broncos into my top 5 at number 5. I left Indy out at 5-1. I left Buffalo out at 4-2, Pittsburgh out at 4-1, the Chargers at 4-2, left them out. I have a 3-3 team as my number 1 team. I didn't put Philly anywhere near there. I didn't put San Francisco or the Rams anywhere near there. That's who I have this week. KC 1, Detroit 2, Tampa 3, Green Bay 4, Denver 5. What do you got, Max?
So I'm going to start at 1, just like you. Our top 3s are incredibly similar, if not exactly similar. I've got Kansas City number 1, Detroit at number 2 after that game. Kansas City vaults themselves to the number 1 spot for me. I think they're getting Rashee Rice back. This is just kind of the time where they're going to start putting it together, getting ready for the playoffs. This is the Kansas City Chiefs preseason, getting ready for the regular season, which starts for them in November. So Chiefs number 1, Detroit number 2. That scuffle at the end of that game, very funny. Shout out to, I forget who it was. It was Brian Branch. Brian Branch for
it was Branch and Smith.
Grabbing Juju by the ear and taking him down after the game. At Detroit, man, they're just a bunch of dogs. Their offensive line still dealing with some things, but Amon-Ra St. Brown still great. Jahmyr Gibbs, all them. Tampa Bay at number 3. I debated on flipping Detroit and Tampa. Tampa's deep, dude. Their wide receiver core, I was impressed with what they were able to put, what Baker was able to put together with that team or he had around him. Baker might be top of the board for MVP right now, which is weird to say. But moving on to number 4, I have the Denver Broncos. Their defense, insane. Offensive line, still the best in football. Bo Nix starting to settle in a little bit, building that chemistry with his receiving core. But, man, they're just loaded everywhere. Dobbins is having a great year. So Detroit, number 4. And then number 5, the Indianapolis Colts. People are
hold on for a second. Sure. I thought you went KC, Detroit, Tampa Bay.
Yes.
Then you just said Detroit 4.
Denver 4. My apologies.
Denver 4. Okay,
yes.
You said Detroit. Okay,
yeah,
Denver 4.
Tongue-tied, sorry. Denver 4, Indy 5. Daniel Jones has been a leader of this football team. Jonathan Taylor has been having an offensive player of the year type season. He's definitely in the running with Puka Nacua and JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba. It's just been a really great year for them. Like I said at the during the NFL preview last week, their offense was number 2 in scoring and their defense was number 3 in opponent points allowed. Indy might be for real coming down the stretch. I mean, we're going to find out as the games go on, but they're good, man. You got any outside teams kind of looking in? I put Seattle there for me, Philly, and the Rams.
Yeah, I definitely was considering Seattle. There's no doubt, and I think I'm considering Pittsburgh. It's a work in progress for them, but they are doing what you've got to do this time of the year. You've got to harvest nuts, Eddie Jordan style. You know, you don't have to be great now. You got to be great at the end of the year, but you got to have enough wins to make the end of the year greatness pay off playing meaningful games. And I think, you know, the Steelers are improving on defense. They've got maybe the most reliable kicker, certainly one of them in football, in Boswell. They have a running back situation with Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell that's actually better than the Najee Harris situation of the last couple of years. And you heard Charch and I talking about the multiple tight ends, the connection and the chemistry already between Rodgers and DK Metcalf. Are they potentially in the market for an Olave or a Waddle? Somebody like that. I think, you know, if they win tonight, they're 5-1, and they've got a game next Sunday night against the Packers at home, and then they play the Colts. Like, there's some big games coming up. In fact, I think that Pittsburgh could end up getting there for me. By the way, New England could end up getting there for me. I want to see if they continue to not only win, but look impressive winning. And we've talked about this. They've got the Titans and Browns the next 2 weeks. They should be at 6-2 in 2 weeks.
If their schedule's pretty cake. It would not surprise me if they finish the year looking like the Commanders did last year.
Yeah. I wanted to mention something real quickly because a friend of mine, I mentioned yesterday, you know, Cincinnati, Miami, and Baltimore are in a bunch of primetime games. So there's a bunch of flex opportunities. I did go confirm they cannot flex the Thanksgiving Day games. Those are etched in stone. So a Baltimore-Cincinnati Thanksgiving night game is not getting moved. But my friend mentioned, he said, just look at the Sunday night schedule for the rest of the year, because that's the obvious flex opportunity. Nothing's getting flexed out as of now. So this week we have Atlanta at San Francisco on Sunday Night Football. Next week, Green Bay at Pittsburgh. The following week, Seattle at Washington. The week after that, Pittsburgh and the Chargers. All right, this assumes Pittsburgh continues to be a factor. The week after that, Detroit at Philly, Sunday Night Football. The week after that, Tampa and the Rams on Sunday Night Football. The week after that, Denver comes here to play, you know, looking like 2 playoff contenders at that point. Then you're into the first weekend of December. Houston at KC. You and I both have said, don't count Houston out. They're too good on defense. Then you get maybe your first opportunity if Minnesota and Dallas aren't in it in mid-December, but you never flex Dallas out of Sunday Night Football. It rarely happens. And then you get the game that I mentioned yesterday with Cincinnati and Miami having a bunch of primetime games the rest of the way. They're going to have to find their way out of them. But they don't flex Thursday night games. They only flex Sunday night and Monday night games now. So, yeah, you got some pretty unbelievable Sunday night football games on the schedule the rest of the year. And by the way, you know, Christmas Day, Dallas, Washington, Detroit, Minnesota, but then Denver, KC. That could be an NFC West Titanic matchup. Denver's legit good. I know they only won 13-11 last week, but that was a bit of an opportunity, you know, to let down after their win in Philadelphia the previous week. A lot of really I mean, who's terrible other than the Jets? Tennessee,
Titans,
I guess.
Yeah. Titans.
Cleveland is the thing about Cleveland is that because of their defense, they've been in most of these games.
The Raiders.
They were it was 9-3 at halftime against the Steelers.
Yeah.
There's nobody that in the NFC that's terrible. Nobody is terrible in the NFC. Not one team. The Saints they beat the Giants and they were right there. They could have beaten the Patriots very easily. They've been in games that they've lost. Remember, they went to Buffalo a few weeks ago, had the ball down 21-16 and driving in the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
there's not one bad team, and there's not one terrible team in the NFC.
I would call them frisky. That would be at worst what we have in the NFC. Frisky teams that could come in and beat you any day or any Sunday, any given week.
The Giants, the Saints, and the Cardinals, right? They're capable of winning against anybody.
What about the Panthers, Kevin? What are your thoughts on the Panthers?
Well, they're 3-3. They've won 2 games in a row.
This is true. This is true.
I mean, they might end up being a bad team. I think they're in amazing to mention that they are in a tricky trap spot against the Jets. The Panthers have to be worried about a trap game, but off of the win over Dallas, it is a possibility. Wanted to read this from Carter in Oakton, Virginia. Holy cow, the smell test is on fire. I've been tracking this pretty closely, Kevin. 11-4-1 last weekend. Crazy. I've been staying on the sidelines waiting for the correction that has not yet come. Regards, Hailskins. Yeah, I'm waiting for the correction too, Carter. But I'm using this as a way to get into, I do not have a smell test pick tonight for all of you that have tweeted asking if I'm going to give out the Cincinnati Bengals tonight. I am not. The action's pretty split on the game, to be honest with you. Pittsburgh's a 5.5-point favorite. I guarantee you if Pittsburgh was like a 2.5-point favorite, 3-point favorite, there'd be a lot of Pittsburgh action, but it is pretty split. Cincinnati covered pretty easily against Green Bay last week. I think a lot of people watching that game, if they had gotten one stop on defense in the second half, they would have had a legitimate chance to win that game because Green Bay could not stop Cincinnati in the second half. I think they scored on every possession in the second half. No smell test pick tonight. There's only one college game tonight. It's ECU, East Carolina, and Tulsa. East Carolina looks right. A little bit right, laying a big number against Tulsa, but no picks tonight. But yeah, Carter, I'm waiting for the correction too. 7 consecutive winning weeks, 11-4-1 last week. Could have been better too, because I was close to giving out Chicago. I was close to giving out Cincinnati as well. And both of those would have been winners. But yeah, I'm waiting for a major correction. I'm sort of guarded against it, but it won't stop me from giving out every game that fits the formula. I had somebody mention to me, now that you're, basically plus 20, I think I'm 50, 30, and 5 on the season. Are you going to slow it down so you guarantee a winning season? No, I've never done that. I've been up by a lot more than 20 units at various points. I don't slow it down. I give you the games that fit the formula every week. But you're right, Carter. The public does win sometimes. If they didn't, then they wouldn't bet anymore. So something's probably coming that's not going to be very pleasant to live through over a Saturday and a Sunday and a Monday night. I don't know if it's this weekend, but there's a 4-9, 4-10, 5-8 weekend coming soon. I can pretty much guarantee it. Hopefully it's not this weekend. I'll have all my picks on tomorrow's show. Joe Witt Jr. is talking right now on Coordinator Day. We're going to have some sound for you when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. It's coordinator day out in Ashburn. Joe Witt Jr. has already met with the media. Kingsbury is doing it as we speak. I mentioned this 2 weeks ago after the loss to Atlanta that I, watched the Joe Witt Jr. press conference. The answers were super long. They were defensive. There was a lot of explanation. There was a lot of, guys have to start doing what they're coached to do. They got to stop, kept saying over and over again, putting on a cape, trying to be a hero, essentially. And I said, look, he may be right. It may be exactly what the issue is. It's a player issue. It's a personnel issue. They're getting coached well and they're not taking the direction well. But you got to be careful going down that path, being that, clear cut on over explaining, over defending yourself and putting it on others. Because if you have a couple more of those games, and you do the same thing, then you gotta wonder why they're not making the personnel changes to get these players that aren't doing what they were told to do out of there. Maybe that's coming. So I was interested, and I haven't heard any of his presser today. I know that it was another kind of lengthy one, but let's go through some of what Joe. What'd you say?
Sorry, you just mentioned the personnel packages, and I just finished cutting up a question from Ben on that. So if you want to kick us off,
we'll go to that.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's start with that one.
Joe, through 6 weeks, 6 games, what's the strength of your defense, do you see?
Pressuring the quarterback right now, the D-line, I would say, with definitely the strength, yes.
And there's always a balance between you want to react to what the offense is showing versus doing what you do well. Like in this last game, what was the challenge there? They went with 11 personnel, way more than they had been, and you guys have been using a little more with 12. What with McGee? What's that balance like? Oh, well, they're doing this now, we have to change, or what do we, stay with our strengths?
Ask the question again, because I'm not quite understanding.
Basically, how do you determine, like, when do you stay with your strengths versus reacting to what they're doing and dictating sort of the terms as opposed to the other way around?
Yeah, so they had been more 12 personnel, all right, and so, but when they went 11, that's not a weakness of ours. We can pressure the quarterback and play really well out of 11 personnel, especially 2x2. We've been playing, looking at some of the analytics, been playing really well in 2x2 situations in 11 personnel. I was anticipating more 12 and more McGee being able to get out there, but they didn't put 12 out there. So, the offense dictates what personnel they put out there, and then we try to match it as much as possible. And hopefully you understand the fact that if we put our 4-3 look out there versus 12, now it limits some of our pressures, because now you have linebackers match on receivers, all right, and that's not what you want. And so or you get real predictable, because now you have to blitz the linebacker that's over the receiver, which they know probably is coming, because they're knowing that you're not going to have McGee covering the slot receiver. So that's why we go with our nickel package versus 11 a lot of the times.
That's interesting. I thought that was a really good question, because there was no doubt that they had played a lot more 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight ends coming in, and they were in a lot more 11, 1 back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers on Monday night. And typically that 11 forces you into a 5th defensive back, so you can cover, the 3 receivers and the tight end and the back out of the backfield, and and it took Jordan McGee off the field, because he had played 12 snaps the previous week with, by the way, Luvu and Bobby Wagner on the field. So you had 3 linebackers on the field more often than not. I thought that answer was actually a good answer in explaining that sometimes in 11 personnel, you've actually got a better opportunity to rush the passer without 3 linebackers on the field. Bottom line is, they haven't done anything well recently other than against teams that were really messed up in their offensive line. I actually think the team up until Monday night was a better run-stopping team than it was last year, and a better pass-rushing team at times than it was last year. But again, context is everything. And, I'm not suggesting that he should say, we got a problem because we're only able to rush the passer and we're only able to stop the run against teams that have major offensive line issues. But I would certainly hope that they understand the reality of their best defensive performances coming against teams that were severely wounded. And in two of the cases, just not good teams, period, in that moment on offense. Russell Wilson's Giants and, Geno Smith's Raiders were not juggernauts offensively. All right, so tell me what you want to play next, because I haven't heard any of these, Max.
Let's do, since Javonte Williams is having such a good year.
I want to hear more about last week before we move to Dallas.
Okay. So then let's talk about working on missed tackles in the season, and then we'll go to screen game defending.
Okay.
Since that's how
missed tackles. Let me hear that one.
Yeah, let's do it.
Going back to the missed tackles, is that difficult to work on in season, just because you're not doing a ton of live hitting in practices? You want to maintain the guy's health in season. Like, is that a difficult thing to improve in season?
I don't think, for the simple fact that, this is the NFL and this is how you have to practice in it, but there's nobody doing it any differently. Okay. You have to make sure that you're getting your body, you're bending at the end of tackles in practice. We're not putting our, some of, like yesterday was a walkthrough. So bend at the end, get your body in position, throw hands and get multiple people there. Vice tackle. Don't leave a guy on a singular tackle when multiple people can be there. So you have to make sure the details of that, because we're not going to the ground, but nobody's going to the ground at this time of the year. So like I said, right now we're at 12% in missed tackles. If we get to 1% better, that's going to put us top 10. We get to 10%, that puts you top 5. So the margins are small in NFL. You know what I'm saying? So we're at 17th right now. That's not where we want to be. We want to be top 10, moving into the top 5 in that area. So we will continue to work at it and get it done.
Yeah, I think, again, the missed tackle games are the games against the teams that were more capable offensively. What about number 6 that you sent me, Max, on defending the run game and things to clean up?
Yeah, let's hear it.
You talked a little bit about the running game last week to this week. What did you see? Because you all were basically stopping the run.
Yeah.
What did you see some key things that you were doing last week that you have to clean up this week with stopping the run a little more?
Yeah, still in between the tackles, the two big guys did a nice job with Kinlaw and Payne. We missed Eddie. It would have been nice to have him, but the ball on the C and D gaps, we're getting outside, and so we have to do a better job of setting edges and making sure that we're flowing. People still aren't running in between the tackles. They didn't necessarily run in between the tackles. It was more perimeter runs. So we have to sure the C and D gaps and the crack toss and those plays that got outside of us. We have to do a better job of setting edges and those things.
Yeah, that's there were some runs in between the tackles, but Payne and Kinlaw's been a monster this year. Look, that game Monday night looked like last year, where they could not, stop runs to that C and outside gap, those outside gaps to the edges. Just go back to the Detroit playoff game where Gibbs is just running for 10 plus every carry. And we saw that for a lot of last year. There is no doubt that they signed Dietrich Wise with the intention of him being a guy that could slow down and stop the run and stop the runs that they were having the most problems with last year. So the loss of Dietrich Wise is a big loss this year. And I think we all knew it when he was lost for the year. The other day, you saw certainly late in the game, Preston Smith, at least on one, not have a clue that he was getting cracked on one of the, he was either the 10 or the 15-yard run. I think it was the 15-yard run by Swift on the pitch. They're going to have to do a better job there, because we've talked about this a lot when it comes to this team. The inability to stop the run better than they did last year would really be a disaster, because now you're really, impacting the pass rush if you're in good down and distance against this defense. And you're really then at a point in which your biggest weakness, which has been coverage, can get exposed. And just, look at what's coming up. Javonte Williams is a good back. He's played well this year. Kansas City can run the football with Pacheco. Seattle can definitely run the football with Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet. And then after that, a guy like Devon Achane in Madrid, he can certainly get to the edge. And so these are this can't become the issue it was last year. It can't. If it does become the issue it was last year, and Monday night was the beginning of a trend of them having a difficult time stopping edge runs in particular, it's going to be really, really difficult defensively. Because I do agree with him that their pass rush with Armstrong, with Miller in those situations, with Kinlaw, I do think that their pass rush has improved from last year. I don't think that they're like regretting Dante Fowler Jr. leaving with his 10.5 sacks. I don't know who's going to get to 10.5. Armstrong maybe. But you're not going to have, because you don't have a game-wrecking pass rusher, you're not going to have a consistently good pass rush if they're in 2nd and 5, 3rd and 2, or they're not in third downs enough overall because your 1st and 2nd down defense is getting torched on the ground. They've got to fix their run defense if what we saw Monday night was the beginning of something. Because, Bijan did it to him. He's a great back. Swift did it against him. He's an okay back. You got other guys coming up, and you got O-lines, and we haven't even talked about Philly. They're down the road. And who knows what they'll look like by then. But you think about it just intuitively, if you can't stop the run and your weakness is pass defense coverage and your strength is pass rush, you're in big trouble because you don't know when they're throwing the football if they're in advantageous down and distance situations. What about number 5, Max, practicing turnovers?
Yeah, and then I want to hit this one that we've got that I believe Tom Shad asked him this about explosive plays and if that's like scheme or if it's players or what.
So we'll go to that one then. I want to hear that one first.
Let's hear it.
The explosive plays earlier, and I know that each one is kind of its own individual thing, but thematically, when you look at them all together, is it more scheme or execution, and what is it like for you as the D coordinator watching the film of those plays?
It's the execution and the communication. If we have great pre-snap communication, it provides better post-snap play. And so a lot of the plays are plays that we've gone over. We just have to make sure we're executing them on game day. That's just what it is. And some of them, like I said, the big play that hit us in this last game, it was a play that should have gone for 8. It went for 55 because of a missed tackle. That falls into that same bucket of explosives.
Yeah, but they had DeAndre Swift had a 19-yard run, a 15-yard run, and a 10-yard run, the latter with the game on the line. There was a 37-yard, play to the Missouri rookie, Luther Burden. There's a 25-yard play the screens were a major issue. They got burned big chunk plays in the screens. The 55-yard DeAndre Swift touchdown was not the only chunk play. Interesting, he went for the second time in 3 weeks. It lapped the post-Atlanta game and post-Chicago game. It's on the players. It's on the execution. It's pre-snap communication, post-snap execution. He was asked about the screen defense. What did he say there?
Like you said, the screen game you had done well, but why did they have some of the success? Was it recognition, awareness? What was it there?
There was a couple of things, one screen that they hit on us that I guess got the biggest yards, that we went the wrong way with one guy, and that allowed the blockers to get up. And then there was 2 that I think got around 11 or 12 yards. And, sometimes that's going to happen in the screen. They had good plays on that, but there was one that really got too many yards that normally didn't happen. Then we hit one in the backfield on a tight end screen. We've done really nice against the screen, but this game, with our pressure, it got behind us a little bit.
Yeah, they've done a nice job against the screen until Monday night. Remember Payne's -7 against Hampton in the Chargers game on a big play there when it was 10-7, I think. Or no, that was later in the game. There's a lot of discussion here as if this isn't kind of a big problem. And I'm sure they know this. There were another 150 yards of offense out there for the Bears if the Bears had executed. Zacchaeus, I've pointed to this play multiple times from their own 3-yard line, is wide open against Wagner, and that's 97 yards potentially for a touchdown. Okay, and let's just say that somebody defensively catches him. It's a 50-yard play. Adunze's touchdown was not a legal formation. If you want to say pushed off, that gets called 30% of the time, OPI on that. Caleb missed guys because he misread the defense, and he was inaccurate on some throws. There was a lot more out there for the Bears, not to mention the fact that, Ben Johnson seems to not like when his running backs against our team are averaging, 8, 9, 10 yards a carry. Because DeAndre Swift only had 14 carries in the game. It's like with Jahmyr Gibbs in the playoff game last year. He only had 14 carries. I think it was 14 in the game. When you're going for 7 to 10 yards a carry, you should get more than 14 carries a game, unless you're way behind for some reason. And, of course, that was never the case in this game. They were ahead. I mean, they still ultimately had more throws, 31 drop-back pass play calls to 25 runs, if you count the Caleb Williams scrambles. What else do we have from Witt Jr.?
Let's go to the practicing turnovers, since that's been such an issue.
Similar to Nikki's question about tackling with turnovers. Is it a year-to-year thing where you're working with the guys on different techniques, different games? Obviously, it's a little bit of ball luck in terms of picking them up, in terms of kind of creating those turnovers. It's something that you guys have preached since you've been here. How do you kind of amp that up as the season goes on?
We got to do a better job as coaches and exposing them in the drills. We had 2 in our hands that we dropped. Okay, so why are we dropping them? All right, are we giving them those type of tips and overthrows type balls in practice enough? Are we giving the linebackers the drive throws when they have to fall back when they're in different spaces? We have to make sure as coaches that we expose to guys, because I'm a firm believer of when we expose them, when they understand it, they gonna make the plays. You know what I'm saying? So we'll do a better job of that.
That's one of those things that, I had Logan on yesterday and I asked him, how much are turnovers random versus sort of created? It's really hard. And they seem to come in bunches when they start to come. I'm not discounting the possibility that all of a sudden this team becomes a better takeaway team. I think it's still a possibility despite just 3 takeaways in 6 games. Only 2 teams in the league have fewer, and one of those teams, the Packers, has played 1 less game. So the Jets have 1 takeaway, the Packers have 2, and Washington has 3. If you're wondering, like the league leaders, Jacksonville's got 14. The Bears now have 12. They're number 2. Rams, Steelers at 10 each. Lions at 9. Colts at 9. Those top 6 takeaway teams all have winning records. And in terms of differential, I mean, that's always a go-to, right? Chicago's number 1, Jacksonville 2. Chicago's 3-2 after the win, if you didn't know that. Chicago, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Indy, Kansas City. Top 6 teams with positive turnover margin are playoff contenders. Then New Orleans sneaks in there. And then after that, it's Tampa, Atlanta, the Rams, the Eagles. And then it's the Texans. Those are all the teams with positive turnover margins. So only 2 teams out of all the teams with positive turnover margins have losing records. The Saints and the Texans, who are 2 and 3, seem to be getting their act together a little bit. Washington right now at -3 in turnover margin. So that would be nice to turn that around for sure. Because remember, last year they had an issue with takeaways as well. Last year they had 17 for the season, and there were 6 teams with fewer. So they were 25th in the league in takeaways. So when you've got a defense that is not great, and I think we can safely say that at this point, being opportunistic and somehow snagging turnovers ends up being a big difference maker. You know, that ends up winning an extra game or two with a bad defensive overall performance, yards, points, but you get 2 extra possessions in the game, takes points off the board for the other team, and sometimes it puts points on the board for your team. They got to get better at that, that's for sure. We'll save some of Joe Witt for the Cowboy game for maybe tomorrow. And if Kingsbury says anything interesting, we'll have that for you next. But I did want to finish the show with a couple of stories now starting to pop up about trade deadline moves that Washington can make. Bill Barnwell has one, and it's on defense. CBS Sports has one, and it's on offense. I'll share both of those with you when we return. I do want you to know that Window Nation right now has a phenomenal deal going on. It's a deal that you can take advantage of, especially in these hard times for our area with the government shutdown. Window Nation knows many of you are struggling, and they want to help. They're offering 2 free windows with every 2 purchased and the opportunity to pay nothing for 2 years with no interest charged. Call them at 866-90-NATION or head to windownation.com. Mention my name. They'll come out and give you a free estimate. They won't pressure you after they leave you with the estimate. You can make the decision. But if you move forward with Window Nation, you're going to be working with a company that was ranked highest on Forbes's list for best window installation companies in America. They've got 96% of their customers that are satisfied over a long period of time in which they have installed over 3 million windows. They've got 45,000 5-star reviews on rating systems. WindowNation.com for buy 2, get 2 free and pay nothing for 2 years.
All right, happy Thursday, everybody. Here's what's happening. The Washington Commanders are placing newly signed pass rusher Drake Jackson on injured reserve. He will miss the next 4 weeks as he is still recovering from his patellar injury that he suffered in 2023. We move to the MLB postseason where the Blue Jays beat the Mariners 13-4 in a rout. The bats were humming for Toronto as they smacked 5 home runs in the game. Vladdy Guerrero Jr. goes 4 for 4 with a solo shot and 2 doubles. To hockey, the Caps, they are off tonight with some injury updates. Pierre-Luc Dubois is still day-to-day dealing with a lower body injury. However, Spencer Carberry has said it is not expected to be a long-term issue. And NBA preseason action underway tonight versus the Detroit Pistons. The Wizards taking on Detroit. Pregame starts right here on the Team 980 at 6:45 after Burgundy and Gold today with Linnell Willingham. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch Denton's office throughout all football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Cliff Kingsbury said about Chris Paul today, quote, he's one of the best communicators on the offensive line that I've ever been around. He's been a real pleasant surprise this season in how he has stepped up, closed quote. I mentioned that because in Steve Suter's grading of the Bears game, he loves himself some Chris Paul and basically said when Cosme comes back, there's no chance that Chris Paul is the guy that he replaces. We'll have more, Witt Jr. and Kingsbury sound on tomorrow's show. I did want to end with a couple of, columns that are out there. Bill Barnwell, one of my favorites, ESPN.com, put out this morning kind of trade deadline deals, possible trade deadline deals. The trade deadline is November 4th. So we are, 2.5 weeks away from that. And the trade that he suggests for Washington is Washington trading Noah I, who, by the way, has played one defensive snap in the last 2 games, or one each, 2 total. Noah I and a 7th-round pick to Cincinnati for Cam Taylor-Britt, cornerback. Cam Taylor-Britt's had some games, but has been more of a disappointment in Cincinnati than a positive. I do want to read, though, what Bill Barnwell writes, because there's some interesting stuff in this story about Washington's defense that some of these stats maybe you haven't heard. But he writes, the Bengals might want to be finished with Taylor-Britt, a 2022 second-round pick who hasn't lived up to expectations in Cincinnati. He has flashed at times during his pro career with 7 interceptions between 2023 and 2024, but he's been benched at different points in each of the past 3 seasons. In week 4, Taylor-Britt lined up against Cortland Sutton in the second quarter and couldn't make a tackle on the veteran wideout, leading to a 22-yard gain. He didn't play a single snap in the second half of that game. But then again, Taylor-Britt played 80% of the snaps 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks later, against the Packers this past Sunday. And though he allowed a 35-yard completion to Matthew Golden, it came on a play where Taylor-Britt didn't do a bad job in coverage. Says it's the final year of his rookie deal. He's owed $2.4 million. It would be a surprise if he returned to the Bengals next season. So this would be an opportunity to move somewhere with a meaningful track record of turning around frustrating careers. He would step in as a reserve corner on the outside for the Commanders, who are allowing, I didn't know this stat, who are allowing more yards per drop back without pressure than any team in the NFL. What does that speak to? Coverage, period. No pressure, so it's all on the coverage. They're allowing more yards per drop back without pressure than any other team in the NFL. He writes, Washington's secondary has been wildly disappointing all season. So it's no surprise that the Commanders haven't been willing to turn to, Igbenogany, who did a solid job for them as a starting. He says it's been a surprise that they have not turned to Igbenogany because he was their starting slot corner for all of 2024. Although the former Dolphins first-round pick played 26 snaps in Week 3 against the Raiders, he's been limited to 10 defensive snaps across Washington's 5 other games. They have really soured on Noah I based on the snap counts. I went and just pulled them up just to make sure that Barnwell wasn't wrong. That seemed wrong. I know he hasn't had a lot of snaps in the last 2 games. He had 28 defensive snaps against the Raiders. He only had 5 against the Giants, 4 against the Falcons, and 1 each against the Chargers and the Bears. He didn't play at all against Green Bay. Was he out against Green Bay? He must have been out against Green Bay. Interesting. Anyway, he writes, Quinn needs to consider making changes given how the likes of Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Sanderstill have played so far this season. Adding another cornerback like Taylor-Britt with coverage ability when things go right would add another option if they decide to sit on one of their starters for any period of time. All right. Yeah, I mean, look, I when I started thinking about, doing something on this today, I was like, if you asked me offense or defense, it's a tough call. I want another receiver, you know, look, if New Orleans wants to move on from Alvin Kamara or Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed, I'd be interested in all three of them. I'm not saying that they should go get all three of them. Shaheed in particular interests me because he's cheap and he is a legit scare the defense deep threat. He'd be the number one deep threat on this team. His speed is outrageous, and he's caught a lot of those big plays. Plus, you can use him in the bubble screen game as well. That interests me. Olave obviously interests me. I doubt New Orleans is going to move on from Olave. The Kamara thing would be interesting because the Saints are clearly going to be in rebuild mode. But I do like Krosky Merritt. But Kamara is a difference maker if they had him. I don't know. I think we're still a week away from being serious about trade deadline talk, even though all those stories are coming out now. CBS put out a story, David Njoku, the tight end from Cleveland, essentially saying, look, Zach Ertz has been fine, but Njoku would be a major upgrade, as he would, as long as he's healthy, because he gets banged up a lot, sort of Debo style. But he is a legit, upper tier tight end at this point. And Cleveland may be looking to clean house. Give me a lot of interesting players potentially on the trade market. Jacoby Myers, everybody assumes, is going to be out in Vegas. Washington may, let's see what happens these next couple of games. But if they're still in it, which we hope they will be, and I think they will be, I'm not going to be surprised if they make a move. I have no idea where it would come from. You know who New Orleans apparently is looking to move on from? Taysom Hill. How about Taysom Hill and Jaden on the field at the same time with Kingsbury's imagination? Be interesting. All right, we're done for the day. Back tomorrow, full football Friday. Again, no smell test pick on the games tonight.